The Tragedy of Othello. Chapter 1. Iago was unhappy. Iago was unhappy. He was an officer in the army of Venice. He was an ensign. An ensign was an important soldier in the army, but a lieutenant was a more important soldier. Iago wanted to be a lieutenant. The general, who was much more important than either an ensign or a lieutenant, decided he needed a new lieutenant. Iago thought the general would choose him, but the general chose Cassio instead. That's why Iago was unhappy. He was also quite angry. He believed he was the best man for the job. He knew Cassio did not have enough experience to do the job properly. He knew some important people had told the general he should choose Iago. He believed the general gave Cassio the job because he was a friend. He complained about this to his friend Roderigo. "Why do you still work for him?" asked Roderigo. "You should look for another job." "No," said Iago. "I will stay with him as his ensign. I will pretend to serve him, but I will serve myself." The general's name was Othello. He was unusual in Venice because he was a black man. He was a very good and brave soldier, and the Duke was happy to make him a general. Othello, however, was in love, and he was a possessive man. He loved Desdemona, the beautiful daughter of a senator. Cassio spoke to Desdemona about Othello and told her what a good and brave man he was. That is why Othello made him a lieutenant. Roderigo also loved Desdemona and asked her father, Brabantio, if he could marry her. However, Brabantio had refused. He thought she should marry somebody more important than Roderigo. One night, Iago discovered that Desdemona had escaped from her father's house and secretly married Othello. He told Roderigo about it as soon as he could. Now Roderigo was angry too. Her father should have allowed him to marry her. Now she had run away and secretly married a black man. He was sure that Brabantio would not be happy about this when he discovered it. The two angry friends decided to tell Brabantio. It was late at night, but they went to his house and began to shout, "Brabantio! Brabantio! Wake up! Thieves and robbers! Brabantio, wake up!" Brabantio woke up and came to the window in his nightclothes to see what the noise was all about. "What do you want? What is all this noise for?" "There are thieves, Brabantio. Look out for your daughter. Are your doors locked? Is your family safe inside?" "Why are you asking this?" "An old black ram has run away with your little white ewe," shouted Iago. "Are you mad? Who are you?" "Don't you recognize my voice?" asked Roderigo. "I am Roderigo." Brabantio was angry. "Roderigo, I told you not to come to my house. You are making trouble because I did not give you my daughter. Go away." "Wait, Brabantio," insisted Iago. "We are telling you the truth. The black man Othello has stolen your daughter." "Go and see if she is in the house," said Roderigo. "If she is there, you can put me in jail for making trouble. However, I am sure you will not find her." Brabantio decided to check. While he was checking, Iago went to find Othello, leaving Roderigo to talk to Brabantio. Brabantio was very angry when he discovered that Roderigo and Iago were right. Desdemona was gone. "Where is she?" he screamed. "Has she married the black man? I will be unhappy forever. Are you sure it was her? Where did you see her? How did she get out? I wish I had allowed you to marry her." He pulled his hair and shook his fists and stamped his feet, but it did not bring Desdemona back. She was gone. Brabantio thought Othello must have used magic to get her out of the house. Roderigo agreed and promised to help him find his lost daughter. Iago found Othello and pretended to be his friend. He warned him that Brabantio was angry about the marriage and would try to get Desdemona back. As they were speaking, Cassio, the new lieutenant, arrived with a message from the Duke. There was trouble in Cyprus, and the Duke wanted to see Othello immediately. At the same time, Brabantio and his men arrived and found them. Brabantio wanted to fight Othello, and Iago pretended to help Othello by threatening Roderigo, who was with them. Brabantio accused Othello of using magic to get his daughter. "There can be no other explanation," he exclaimed. "Take him, men, and put him in prison. He is a sorcerer." Before Brabantio's men could take him, Othello told Brabantio that the Duke wanted to see him immediately about trouble in Cyprus. Brabantio, being a senator, was probably wanted too. They decided to go to the Duke together. The Duke was meeting with the senators. It was an emergency. Messengers had told them that the Turks were sailing toward the island of Cyprus, and the Duke wanted to send Othello to defend it. When Brabantio and Othello arrived, Brabantio anxiously told the Duke that the general had used magic to steal his daughter. "My daughter would not marry a black man," he said. "It must have been magic." Othello admitted he had taken away the old man's daughter and married her, but he denied using magic. "The only magic I used," he said, "was the magic of my stories. I have had many adventures in my life and traveled to many places. Brabantio was my friend and liked to hear the stories of my adventures. His daughter listened to these stories too and asked me to tell her more. I did. She fell in love with me, and I fell in love with her." The Duke called on Desdemona, and she agreed with Othello. The Duke asked Desdemona who she was more loyal to, her husband or her father. Desdemona responded that she loved her father, but she felt that she must change her primary loyalty from her father to her husband. Brabantio understood Othello was telling the truth and reluctantly agreed to accept Othello as his daughter's husband. The senators decided that Othello should go to Cyprus immediately, and he agreed. However, Desdemona did not want to stay with her father, and he did not want her to stay with him either. She asked the Duke if she could go to Cyprus with Othello. This was unusual, but Othello promised the senators that he would still be able to do his job properly. The senators agreed. They wished him well and told him to take care of Desdemona. He decided to leave that night, and Desdemona would follow him a day later. "My ensign Iago is an honest man, and I trust him," said Othello. "He will travel with her to Cyprus." Brabantio was still angry at his daughter, so he warned Othello to be careful. "She deceived her father. She may deceive you too." Othello left for Cyprus that night. Desdemona left the following morning with Iago and Roderigo. Chapter 2. Trouble in Cyprus. Roderigo still loved Desdemona and was disappointed that she had married Othello. He told Iago that he was thinking about killing himself. "Don't be stupid," said Iago. "I will not be your friend if you do." "It is stupid to live when living is pain," replied Roderigo. "I love her. I cannot help it." Iago disagreed. He believed that men make their own lives. He advised Roderigo to get some money. "Othello and Desdemona will get tired of each other," he said. "When that happens, you must be there, and you must have some money. Buy some jewels and give them to me. I will give them to Desdemona at the right time and tell her about your love. I am sure that you will have success. It is better to be killed trying to get what you want than to die without trying. Look, I hate that black general, and I will be pleased if you can take his wife from him. We can help each other take revenge on him." Iago's plan was to make Othello think that Cassio and Desdemona were in love with each other. Othello and Cassio were on their way to Cyprus in 2 separate ships. The next day, Iago and Roderigo sailed to Cyprus as well, taking Desdemona with them. There was a huge storm that completely destroyed the Turkish ships. As a result, Cyprus was not attacked. Cassio arrived on the island, but he did not know where Othello's ship was. They had been separated in the storm. The next ship to arrive was Iago's. He came ashore with Roderigo and Desdemona, as well as his own wife Emilia. They waited anxiously for news of Othello. Cassio took Desdemona aside and told her about Othello's ship. Iago saw the two talking together and planned to use this against both of them. When Othello arrived, he and Desdemona were very happy to see each other. "I love you more and more every day," confessed Desdemona. "I wish there was a storm every day so that I could receive a welcome such as this," remarked Othello. "I have good news for everybody," he continued. "The war is over. The Turks drowned in the storm. There will be no invasion." This really was good news, and everybody cheered. Iago began to put his plan into action. First, he told Roderigo that Desdemona loved Cassio. Roderigo did not want to believe this, but Iago convinced him. "Loving a black man is exciting at first, but it is already making her bored," explained Iago. "Now she wants to love a white man. Cassio is very handsome, and he is now a lieutenant. Didn't you see them talking together privately before Othello arrived?" Then he told Roderigo to offend Cassio in some way, so that Cassio would fight him. Roderigo agreed to do it. Iago smiled and rubbed his hands. He would make Othello suffer. The people of Cyprus were very happy that the Turkish ships had sunk in the storm, and Othello decided to have a big party that night. However, somebody had to stay on guard, and this was Cassio's job. It was time for Iago to put the next part of his plan into action. He talked to Cassio about Desdemona while he was on guard. Cassio agreed that she was a beautiful woman. Then Iago convinced him to drink some wine, and Cassio was soon drunk. He sang some songs with Iago and Montano, the governor of Cyprus. Iago told Montano that Cassio was often drunk. "It's not a very good thing, because he is Othello's lieutenant," he commented. "Somebody should tell Othello," suggested Montano. Suddenly, Cassio started shouting at Roderigo and then began to hit him. Montano tried to stop him. "You're drunk!" he cried out. Cassio began to fight Montano. Iago told Roderigo to go and tell people there was a fight. Othello came and told them to stop. "Stop fighting!" shouted Iago. "Can't you hear your general?" Othello was pleased with Iago for helping to stop the fight. Of course, he did not know that the fight was part of Iago's plan. He was angry with Cassio and Montano for fighting when everybody was having fun at the party. "Who started it?" he asked Iago. Iago told him the story of the fight and blamed Cassio for it. "However," he said, "men will be men. Cassio has done a small wrong, but I am certain that he had a good reason. Perhaps it is best to forget it." Of course, he did not want Othello to forget it at all. Othello fell into his trap. "Cassio," he said, "you are my friend, but I do not understand what you did tonight. You are no longer my lieutenant. Look, you have disturbed Desdemona." This was true. Desdemona came out to see what the trouble was. Othello told everybody to go back to the party, and he left with Desdemona. Cassio was very upset because he had lost his good reputation. "Don't worry about it," said Iago. "A good name is not important. People often get good names without earning them, and lose them the same way. You only lose your good name if you think you have lost it. Ask the general to forgive you, and you will soon have your good name back. If I ask him to change his mind, he'll tell me that I was drunk. I cannot ask him." "Every man gets drunk sometimes," said Iago. Then Iago put the next part of his plan into action. He looked very kindly at Cassio. "I can give you some advice," he offered. "I think you should ask Desdemona to talk to him. She is your friend, and Othello will listen to her. He will do what she asks." Cassio thought this was good advice and thanked Iago for it. He did not realize this was the next step in Iago's plan. Iago even asked his wife Emilia to help Cassio speak to Desdemona in private. Thank you, said Cassio. You are a very good friend. Iago smiled and rubbed his hands. The plan was working. Emilia helped Cassio meet with Desdemona. Desdemona agreed to help Cassio become the lieutenant again. She thought it would not be difficult to convince the general. As they were speaking, Othello and Iago approached them. Cassio did not want to talk to Othello because he still felt badly about being drunk, so he quickly left. Iago, however, made sure that Othello saw him leaving. Was that Cassio? Asked Othello. I don't think so, lied Iago. Why would he run away looking guilty? I'm quite sure it was him, replied Othello. Desdemona asked her husband to make Cassio a lieutenant again. Othello, however, was beginning to feel suspicious of Cassio. He said he would think about it. Desdemona kept asking him about it. Othello asked Iago for advice. Tell me what you think, said Othello. Iago smiled. He was very clever. He did not say that Cassio was a bad man or that Cassio was in love with Desdemona. I cannot tell you what I think, because it is very bad to steal a person's good name. A good name is the most important thing a man or woman has, he said. Then you do not need to tell me, said Othello. I can guess what you are thinking. Don't be jealous, my lord, said Iago. If a man's wife loves another man, it is better that the man does not know about it. It is terrible to doubt your wife's honesty, because you will think about it every day. No, said Othello. I will never be jealous just because people say good things about my wife. I know she is beautiful and clever. I love her. I must see proof before I believe she loves another man. Good, said Iago. Then I can tell you what I think. It is not proof, and therefore will not make you jealous. I think you should watch your wife closely. The girls of Venice are deceptive. I know them. Remember that she deceived her father to marry you. She is a very clever woman, even though she is young. You know that yourself. Othello thought about Iago's words and began to worry. He thought that Iago knew much more than he was saying. He asked Iago to ask Emilia to watch Desdemona. Please, tell me any news of what she does, he asked Iago. Iago agreed. He smiled and rubbed his hands. The plan was working. Chapter 3. The Handkerchief. Good luck doesn't always come to good people. Sometimes it comes to people who don't deserve it. This is what happened to Iago. He had some good luck. This is how it happened. Othello was worried about what Iago had said. Desdemona saw him. She thought he looked sick and asked him what was wrong. He told her that he had a headache. She tied her handkerchief around his head to help him get better. As they were walking away, Othello dropped the handkerchief. Emilia saw it and picked it up. She knew that this was a special handkerchief. It was Othello's first gift to Desdemona. She gave it to her husband Iago so that he could give it back to Othello. He was very pleased with this good luck. He would use it to make his plan work. Othello became more and more worried. His jealous was like poison in his mind. He could not sleep. He could not enjoy being with his wife. He could not stop asking himself whether she was in love with Cassio. At last, he decided it would be better not to know anything at all. He was angry with Iago for making him suspicious. If she loves Cassio and I don't know about it, it doesn't matter, he said. Then I should not be honest with you, replied Iago. No, you must tell the truth, said Othello. He was very confused and could see no answer to his problems. He became even angrier. You must give me proof that she loves Cassio. Iago was happy to hear this, but he pretended that he did not like it at all. I wish I had never said anything, he said. I can't give you proof. I can only tell you what happened." "Tell me, tell me," said Othello, full of anger and jealousy. Iago frowned. He seemed unhappy to tell this story. "One night," he said, "I slept in the same room as Cassio. While he was asleep, he kept saying Desdemona's name. Then he whispered, 'We must be careful. We must hide our love.' It is not proof because it was only his dream. However, there is also something else." "What is it? What is it?" cried Othello. "You gave your wife a handkerchief that was decorated with strawberries, didn't you?" "Yes, I did," shouted Othello. "I saw Cassio wipe his beard with Lady's handkerchief. It looked like your wife's handkerchief, but I am not sure." "If it is, I will kill her," cried Othello. "No, no," said Iago. "It is not proof. It is only suspicion. Even if it is hers, she may not have given it to him. You may be wrong." But Othello would not listen. He told Iago to kill Cassio. "You are my lieutenant now," he said. Iago agreed, but asked Othello to let Desdemona live. But again, Othello would not listen. Desdemona could not find her handkerchief. When she again asked Othello to change his mind and make Cassio the lieutenant, Othello demanded to see the handkerchief. He would not talk about Cassio until he saw the handkerchief. Desdemona told him it was not lost, but she did not want to go and get it. She wanted to hear about Cassio first, but whatever she said, Othello had the same answer. The handkerchief. Cassio found the handkerchief in his room. He didn't know whose handkerchief it was. He thought it was pretty. "Somebody will ask for this handkerchief," he said, "but I will make a copy of it first." He gave his girlfriend Bianca the handkerchief and asked her to make one just like it. She was not very happy because she thought it was a gift from another girl. Cassio told her he found it in his room, and he did not know who it belonged to. Iago was pleased. His plan was working well. It was time to put the next part into action. He told Othello to hide nearby while he spoke to Cassio. When Cassio came, he talked to him about Bianca, but he said her name softly so that Othello could not hear it. Cassio did not love Bianca, but he knew that she loved him. He laughed at the idea that he would marry her and complained that she always swallowed him and wanted to talk to him and kiss him. Othello heard his loud voice and thought he was talking about Desdemona. As he listened and grew angrier, Bianca returned and threw the handkerchief at Cassio. "I do not believe you," she said. "You said that you found it in your room, but you don't know who left it there. How can that happen? Take it back. I will not make a copy of it." At that moment, Othello recognized Desdemona's special handkerchief. Chapter 4. The End of Iago's Plan. Othello had never been so angry in his life. He was sure that his beautiful wife Desdemona was in love with Cassio. He told Iago to get some poison so that he could kill her that night. Iago said he should strangle her in her bed, and Othello agreed. "I will go and kill Cassio," added Iago. Before either of them could do anything, Desdemona's cousin, Lodovico, arrived from Venice with a letter from the Duke. Desdemona told Lodovico that Othello and Cassio were having an argument. "You will have to make them friends again," she said. Othello read the letter. The Duke made Cassio the governor of Cyprus and wanted Othello to come back to Venice. Desdemona was very happy, but Othello was not. Desdemona said she wanted Cassio to be happy because she liked him. Othello was so angry that he hit her. Desdemona could not understand why he had done that. She began to cry. Othello shouted angrily at her and told her to go away. Lodovico could not understand any of this either, but Iago could. "Is this the same Othello that I knew in Venice?" asked Lodovico. "He has changed," explained Iago. "Watch him. He may do more than hit her. I hope he doesn't, but I am afraid he will." Othello spoke to Emilia, Iago's wife. She did not know about Iago's plan and told Othello that Desdemona was true and honest. She had never seen her do anything to make her think that she loved Cassio. Othello did not believe her. He called Desdemona and asked her to promise that she was honest. She did. "I know you are lying," he shouted. Then he began to cry. "You look like a beautiful flower," he cried. "But you are a weed. You love another man." She denied it, but he would not believe her and left her in her room. Desdemona asked Emilia to get her husband. Iago came and pretended to feel sorry for Desdemona. "Why does he think you love another man?" he asked. "I don't know," replied Desdemona. "If a bad person has been telling lies about this beautiful and good wife," said Emilia, "he should be hanged. I will break every bone in his body." "There can be no such person," stated Iago. "It is impossible. Don't worry, Desdemona. Othello is anxious about the work of the government. He will not stay angry. Don't cry. Everything will be all right." Desdemona begged him to go and talk to Othello. As he left, Iago smiled and rubbed his hands. Then he saw his old friend Roderigo. Roderigo was angry with him. Roderigo had given Iago jewels to give Desdemona so that she would love him. Desdemona would not speak to him. He thought that Iago had not given her the jewels, and he was right. Iago had kept them. Now, however, he told Roderigo that Othello and Desdemona were about to leave Cyprus, and that Cassio would become the governor. "The only way to keep Othello and Desdemona here is to kill Cassio. If you do this, I can promise you that Desdemona will be yours." Roderigo wanted Desdemona so much that Iago was easily able to convince him to kill Cassio. Iago wanted Roderigo to die too, so that he wouldn't have to return the jewels he was supposed to give Desdemona. Othello, meanwhile, found Desdemona talking to Emilia and Lodovico. He told her to go to bed. He would come to bed himself soon. Desdemona was very sad. "Do you think there are women who do not love their husbands?" she asked Emilia. "Oh, yes," replied Emilia. "I am sure of it. But usually it is the husband's fault. They behave badly." That night, Roderigo and Iago hid behind a wall, waiting for Cassio. When he came, Roderigo attacked him with his sword, but Cassio stabbed him with his knife. Iago cut Cassio's legs from behind and ran away, leaving the two men shouting for help. "Murder! Murder!" they cried. Othello heard Cassio and saw him bleeding on the ground. He thought Iago had kept his promise and attacked him. This convinced him that Iago really believed that Desdemona loved Cassio. He went to Desdemona's bedroom. He was determined that she should die too. Lodovico and his servant Graziano heard Cassio and Roderigo shouting. They went to see who was making all the noise. They found the two men on the ground. Iago came, pretending that he knew nothing about it. Cassio said a murderer had tried to kill him. "I will never walk again," he cried. "Would you try to murder a man in the dark?" shouted Iago at Roderigo. He took out his knife and stabbed him. More people arrived. Bianca was very upset to see Cassio bleeding. Iago told Lodovico to watch her because she could be guilty too. When Emilia arrived, he told her to go and tell Othello and Desdemona what had happened. Othello was in Desdemona's bedroom. He watched her sleep and thought how beautiful she was. He kissed her, and she woke up. He told her sadly that he was going to kill her. She asked him for a reason. "You gave your handkerchief to Cassio," he said. "Confess your sin." "I did not give it to him," she replied. "I saw it in his hand," said Othello, "and he has confessed that you love him. I heard it myself. Iago has killed him for his sins." Desdemona began to cry. Othello was angry and strangled her. Emilia came running to the room to tell Othello the news. "Cassio has killed Roderigo," she said. "Roderigo and Cassio are both killed?" asked Othello. "No, Cassio is not dead," replied Emilia. Then she saw Desdemona lying dead on the bed. "I killed her," confessed Othello. "What? Why?" cried Emilia. "She loved Cassio," said Othello. "That is not true," cried Emilia. "She was a true wife who loved only her husband." "Your husband told me, and I saw it for myself," insisted Othello. "My husband?" "Yes, your husband. He is an honest man who loves his friends and hates evil." "If my husband said that, he is a liar!" she cried. She began to shout, "Murder! Murder! Othello has killed his wife!" Montano, the governor, and Iago ran into the room. "Iago," said Emilia, "Othello says you told him his wife loved Cassio. I know you would not say such a thing. He is trying to blame you for the murder." "But I did tell him," said Iago, "because it is true. Be quiet." "I will not be quiet," said his wife. "Desdemona lies murdered on her bed. It is terrible! It is terrible!" "Go home!" shouted Iago. "I know it is true," said Othello. "I saw her handkerchief in Cassio's hand." Suddenly, Emilia realized what her husband had done. She cried out as if in pain. "Keep quiet!" shouted Iago. "Go home!" "I will not. I will tell what I know," said Emilia. "She did not give it to Cassio. I found that handkerchief and gave it to my husband to give to you." "Liar!" shouted Iago. He took out his sword and killed her. Then he ran away. Montano ran after him and called some soldiers to help him. They caught him and brought him back. Now Othello realized that Iago had tricked him. No man had ever felt sorrier than he felt then. He had killed his wonderful wife, and all because of Iago's lies. He kissed his dead wife's lips. Then he took out his knife and killed himself. The Tragedy of Macbeth. Chapter 1. 3 Witches. Many, many years ago, there was a king in Scotland whose name was King Duncan. He was a good king, but the times were warlike. He had an enemy called MacDonald. This man and his followers fought against the king and tried to kill him. There was a terrible battle, but the king's cousin Macbeth won the battle and killed MacDonald. The king of Norway heard about the battle and thought this would be a good time to attack Scotland. He felt sure that he could win the war. After all, many of Scotland's men were wounded or killed in MacDonald's rebellion. Not only that, but one of Scotland's leaders, the Thane of Cawdor, had agreed to help him. Macbeth and his friend Banquo had no time to rest. As soon as they had defeated MacDonald, they had to fight against the Norwegians. It was a very bloody battle. Many men were killed, but Macbeth and Banquo were good and strong and brave. They won that battle too. King Duncan in Scotland were safe, and the King of Norway agreed to pay King Duncan a lot of money. King Duncan was very pleased and grateful to Macbeth and Banquo. As soon as he saw what the Thane of Cawdor had done, he was very angry. He decided to execute him and make Macbeth the new Thane of Cawdor in his place. After the battles, Macbeth and Banquo were on their way back to see the king. They were tired but pleased. Suddenly, they heard thunder and 3 strange beings appeared. They looked like very old women, but they had beards and wore rags for clothes. Macbeth and Banquo, of course, were not frightened, but they did wonder what these strange beings were. They were witches, as Macbeth and Banquo soon found out. The first witch called Macbeth the Thane of Glamis, which he was. The second witch called him the Thane of Cawdor. King Duncan had made him Thane of Cawdor, but Macbeth did not know that yet. The third witch called him the future king, Macbeth was surprised and a little frightened to hear the witches say these things. Then they told Banquo he would be the father of kings, though he would never be king himself. Macbeth could not understand how he could ever be a king. He was the king's cousin, but the king was alive, and he had 2 sons. He wanted the witches to tell him more, but they would not say anything and disappeared into the air. Macbeth and Banquo wondered if they had eaten something that had made them mad. Had they imagined these witches, or were they real? This question was soon answered. Messengers arrived from the king to greet Macbeth and Banquo. They told him that King Duncan had made Macbeth the Thane of Cawdor. Macbeth would not believe it because he did not know that the Thane of Cawdor had helped the Norwegian king in his war against Scotland. The messengers told him what had happened, and that King Duncan had decided to execute the Thane of Cawdor. Then Macbeth believed it and began to wonder how he would become the future king. It made him excited and frightened to think of it. He decided that he would do nothing to make it come true. He would not make himself king. Banquo, of course, also began to wonder what the message of the witches meant for him. The first part of their message had come true very quickly. It seemed certain to Macbeth and Banquo that the remainder of their message must also come true. When Macbeth and Banquo arrived at the king's palace, he greeted them and thanked them for their bravery. Everybody cheered for the heroes that returned from battle. King Duncan told them all that his oldest son Malcolm would be the next king. Everybody cheered again, but Macbeth wondered how the witch's message could come true if Malcolm became king of Scotland. He was already beginning to look forward to being king, but Malcolm was a problem. King Duncan told Macbeth he would come to stay with him in Macbeth's castle at Inverness. Macbeth went on ahead of him to prepare the castle for the king's visit. Before Macbeth left, however, he wrote his wife a letter and told her what the witches had said. He told her part of their message had already come true, and he was now the Thane of Cawdor. Lady Macbeth was very pleased to read the letter, because she was an ambitious woman and would very much have liked to be the queen. However, she was worried about her husband. She thought he was too kind. He was ambitious, but he wanted to achieve his ambitions without hurting anybody or doing anything wrong. She thought he needed somebody to tell him what to do. She decided she would help him become the king. It didn't bother her if she had to hurt somebody or do something bad. She would make sure that he became the king. When a messenger told her King Duncan would stay in her castle that night, she was very excited. She was determined to be hard and cruel. She prepared her heart and mind for murder. When Macbeth arrived at the castle, she prepared him too. "Your face is too honest," she told Macbeth. "You must welcome the king and look innocent and friendly, but underneath you will be like a serpent. I will tell you what to do. King Duncan must never leave this castle alive." King Duncan arrived at the castle a few hours later with Banquo. His 2 sons, Malcolm and Donalbain, and some other members of the king's retinue were also with him. Lady Macbeth came out to greet them. She made the king feel very welcome and told him that it was a great honor to have him and his retinue staying at the castle. The king spoke kindly to Lady Macbeth and told her that her husband was a brave and wonderful warrior. While the king and his retinue were eating dinner, Macbeth and his lady had a private conversation. Macbeth did not want to kill King Duncan, although he wanted to be king. "If I were going to kill him," he said, "I would do it quickly, before I've had time to think about it. But now it is too late. He trusts me and has honored me. He is a very good king. I have no reason to kill him but my own ambition. I will not do it." Lady Macbeth accused him of being a coward. "Why do you hope for something and then not take it when you have the chance? It is because you do not dare." "I dare to do anything a man can dare," replied Macbeth. "Nobody dares more." "Then be a man!" cried Lady Macbeth. "The king is tired and will soon be asleep. I will give the 2 guards at his door some wine so that they fall asleep. Then you will take the opportunity." Macbeth decided to do it. Chapter 2. Murder. That night King Duncan gave Macbeth some valuable gifts from his treasure house. and he gave Lady Macbeth a large diamond. He said she was a very good hostess, and he was very pleased with the way she had welcomed him to the castle. Then he went to bed. A few hours later, Banquo and his son Fleance saw Macbeth and a servant walking in the castle. Banquo told Macbeth he had dreamed about the three witches, and Macbeth told him he would honor him when the witch's message came true. The two men said good night to each other, and Macbeth told his servant to go to bed. Lady Macbeth had given the two guards the wine, and they were asleep. She rang a small bell to tell Macbeth he could now go in and murder the king. Macbeth went into the king's bedroom and stabbed him to death with the guards' knives. He was so horrified by what he had done that he could not think. He took the knives out of the bedroom and carried them to Lady Macbeth. "I have done it," he said. "This is a sorry night." Lady Macbeth saw the knives and the blood on his hands. "Why have you brought the knives here?" she asked. "They should be with the guards, and you should put blood on their clothes, then go and wash your hands." But Macbeth was too afraid to go back and see what he had done. "Give me the knives," ordered his wife. "I'll go and do it. I'm not afraid of dead people. They cannot hurt me." When she returned, Macbeth and his wife washed the blood from their hands. Macbeth already felt sorry for what he had done, but he could not undo it. He had to go on. It was already early morning, and they heard somebody knocking on the door. It was Macduff and Lennox, two other Scottish thanes, who were traveling with the king. They wanted to know if the king was awake yet. He had told them to call him early. Macbeth showed them the door that led to his bedroom. Macduff came running back shouting, "Murder! Murder!" and soon the whole castle was in an uproar. Lady Macbeth pretended to be very upset. Macbeth ran to the king's room. He pretended to be very angry with the two guards, whose knives, hands, and clothes were bloody. He killed them before they could say anything. When Macduff asked him why he did that, he replied that it was because he loved good King Duncan and could not bear to see his murderers alive. When Donalbain and Malcolm heard the news of their father's murder, they decided it was not safe to stay at the castle. They were afraid they would be murdered too if they stayed in Scotland. Malcolm fled to England, and Donalbain fled to Ireland. This made people believe they had paid the guards to kill their father. Macbeth and his lady were quite happy to let people believe this. The guards, of course, could not deny it, because Macbeth had killed them. King Duncan was dead. His two sons had fled. The next person in line to be the king was King Duncan's cousin, Macbeth. He was crowned king, and Lady Macbeth became the queen. Banquo, meanwhile, was still thinking about the witch's message. It had come true. Macbeth was king. Banquo suspected that Macbeth had murdered King Duncan, but he did not say anything. He remembered the witches had said he would be the father of kings. He wondered how this would happen. Macbeth, of course, was thinking about it too. He was worried about it. He wanted his sons to be kings, but the witches had said Banquo would be the father of kings. "Have I murdered good King Duncan so that Banquo's sons will be kings?" he asked himself. He had to do something about it. He discovered that Banquo and his son Fleance were going out riding that afternoon. He reminded Banquo to be back in time for the big feast that evening. Macbeth wanted to celebrate being king. When Banquo had left, Macbeth got some prisoners from the jail. These men were murderers. He told them to murder Banquo and Fleance while they were out riding. The murderers lay waiting beside the road. It was getting dark when they finally saw Banquo and Fleance coming. They attacked them. Banquo shouted to his son, telling him to run away. The murderers killed Banquo, but Fleance escaped in the darkness. Macbeth told his wife that he had told the murderers to kill Banquo and his son. However, he was still upset because he had killed King Duncan. Lady Macbeth told him to look more cheerful. "What's done is done," she reassured him. "Go and enjoy the feast with all the thanes and lords. You are the king." "I will," replied Macbeth. "We must both appear cheerful and happy, because nobody must ever know what we have done. Come, let us go to the feast." Chapter 3. More Witches and a Ghost. Macbeth and his lady went to the feast. They were the King and Queen of Scotland, and they were celebrating, but they had a guilty secret. They had murdered King Duncan, and now Macbeth's best friend Banquo was also dead. While they were at the feast, one of Banquo's murderers came to see Macbeth and told him that Banquo was dead. Macbeth was pleased, but when he discovered that Fleance had escaped, he was not pleased at all. However, he decided that Fleance could not harm him yet, and he would be able to kill him later. Then something strange happened. All the lords were sitting at the table. There was one empty chair for Banquo and another for King Macbeth. When Macbeth came in, he apologized for being late and said he wanted to wait for Banquo. "I don't understand why he is so late," he lied. Banquo's ghost came and sat in King Macbeth's seat. He did not speak, but sitting in the king's chair was a clear message that his sons would be kings. The lords asked Macbeth to sit down and begin eating. They could not eat before he began. Suddenly, Macbeth recognized Banquo's ghost sitting in his chair. "Who is this?" he cried. Then he spoke to the ghost. "You can never say that I did it. Don't point your bloody finger at me." The lords thought he was sick, and they all wanted to leave the party. Lady Macbeth told them that this sometimes happened to her husband, and they should not worry about it. Then she took Macbeth aside and asked him what was wrong. The ghost left. "I saw the ghost of Banquo," he exclaimed. "He was sitting in my chair." Lady Macbeth had not seen the ghost. "You're only looking at a chair," she said. "It is empty." "I'm sure he was there," cried Macbeth. He told the lords he had a strange illness, and they should not worry about him. "Let's stand and drink to our dear friend Banquo," he toasted. As they drank, Banquo's ghost came back in and sat in Macbeth's chair again. "Get out!" screamed Macbeth. "You are not real." He called the ghost many different names. He said he would not be afraid to fight him if he came in the shape of a tiger or a bear, but the ghost did not answer. "Get out!" screamed Macbeth again. The ghost got up and left. Macbeth's eyes were wide open, and he was breathing heavily. He looked around at the lords. "I am sorry," he apologized. "Please, sit down and enjoy your food." The lords began to ask him questions, but Lady Macbeth told them this would make him worse. She advised them to leave quickly. They all got up from their chairs, wondering what strange illness made Macbeth act so strangely. They wished him good health and left him with Lady Macbeth. Macbeth was now very worried. He remembered Macduff had not been at the feast and wondered where he was and what he was doing. He told Lady Macbeth that he would go and find the witches and ask them to tell him more. He wanted to know if he had to kill any more people. Lady Macbeth told him he should first go to bed and have a good sleep. Some of the Scottish lords began to suspect that Macbeth had killed King Duncan and Banquo. Macduff was one of them. He was not at the feast because he had gone to England to serve Malcolm, King Duncan's son. He also asked King Edward of England to make war on Scotland and get rid of Macbeth. Macduff's friend Lennox knew about this and was ready to help him if King Edward agreed to come to Scotland. The witches met with Hecate, the goddess of witchcraft. Hecate was annoyed because the three witches had not included her in their meeting with Macbeth and Banquo. Now she told them to go and find Macbeth. He wants to know more about his future. He is wondering whether he has to kill any more people. You must make him feel safe, she told them. Feeling safe will be his worst enemy. The witches and Hecate met with some other witches who were already making magic spells. These witches had a large pot on a fire. They threw all kinds of things into the pot. They had pieces of snakes and frogs, dog's teeth, poisonous roots, and the blood of different animals. The pot boiled and bubbled, and the witches sang and danced around it. Hecate was very pleased. Macbeth arrived and demanded that the witches tell him the truth. They told him they would. Suddenly, a head with arms appeared. Macbeth was going to ask it a question, but the witches told him that it already knew what he was thinking. He should just listen. He listened. The head told him to beware of Macduff. Then it disappeared. Again, Macbeth wanted to ask it more questions, but the witches told him to be quiet and wait. Now a child, covered in blood, appeared. "Be bold and brave," it stated. "Nobody who is born of a woman shall harm Macbeth." "Then I do not have to fear Macduff, for he is born of a woman," reasoned Macbeth. The bloody child disappeared, and another child took its place. This one wore a crown and had a tree in its hand. "What is this?" asked Macbeth. "Be quiet," commanded the witches. "You may listen, but you may not speak." This child also told Macbeth he should be bold and brave. He did not have to worry about any enemies. He would not be defeated until the trees of Burnham Forest came marching up the hill to Dunsinane, his castle. "This can never happen," cried Macbeth. "Trees cannot march. I shall not worry. I shall not fear. But tell me one more thing. Will Banquo's sons be kings?" "Do not ask for more," warned the witches. "May you be cursed forever if you don't tell me this," cried Macbeth. The boiling pot sank into the ground, and there were strange noises in the air. Then Macbeth saw a line of 8 kings. He also saw Banquo, who pointed to the kings and smiled at Macbeth. Macbeth understood what this meant. Banquo would be the father of a dynasty of 8 kings. "Is this really true?" asked Macbeth. "Yes, it is true," replied Hecate. Then they all vanished into the air, and Macbeth was left alone. Macbeth discovered Macduff had fled to England. He decided he would attack Fife, where Macduff was the Thane, and kill his family and servants. Lady Macduff was in the castle at Fife, talking to another Thane called Ross. She wondered why her husband had fled to England. "Did he do something wrong?" she asked. Ross advised her to be patient, but she could not understand why he would flee and leave his wife and children behind in danger. "Why did he not stay and fight?" she asked. Ross told her her husband was wise and good, and she should trust his judgment. When he had left, Lady Macduff told her son that his father was dead. The boy could not believe it and joked about it with his mother. Then a messenger arrived and told Lady Macduff she was in danger. He did not dare to stay, but ran from the castle as quickly as he could. Lady Macduff did not know where she should go to be safe. While she was thinking about it, Macbeth's messengers arrived and told her that her husband was a traitor. The boy shouted at the messenger that it was not true. The messenger stabbed him and killed him. Lady Macduff ran from the castle crying and screaming, "Murder!" The murderers ran after her. They caught her and killed her. Then they killed all the other children and servants in the castle. Chapter 4. The Messages Come True. Macduff was in England, where he found King Duncan's son Malcolm. He begged him to return to Scotland and fight against Macbeth. "He is a bad king, and I believe he murdered your father," urged Macduff. "You should be the king." Malcolm was pleased to see Macduff. He had already spoken to King Edward of England. 10,000 men were ready to go to Scotland and fight against Macbeth. In Scotland, Ross heard that Macduff's castle in Fife had been attacked, and that Lady Macduff and her children had all been killed. He went to England to tell Macduff the sad news and warn him that his life was in danger. Macduff could not believe it. His grief had no limits. Malcolm told him he should turn his grief into anger and use it to attack Macbeth. Macbeth left his castle at Dunsinane to go and fight his enemies. While he was away, Lady Macbeth began to behave strangely. At night, she would get out of her bed and walk around the castle in her sleep. One of her servants saw her and heard her speaking. She decided to call a doctor. He asked her what Lady Macbeth said in her sleep, but the servant was very afraid and would not tell him. "You should tell me," he encouraged. "It will help me to cure her." However, she would not tell him. She asked him to watch with her. They watched for 2 nights and nothing happened. But on the 3rd night, Lady Macbeth came out of her bedroom. Her eyes were open, but she was asleep. The doctor and the servant watched Lady Macbeth sleepwalking. She began to rub her hands as if she were trying to wash them. "She does that all the time," whispered the servant. "Sometimes she does it for 15 minutes or more." "There's still a spot!" cried Lady Macbeth. She was speaking in her sleep. Her voice sounded like it came from far away. The doctor wrote down everything she said. Then she began to talk about all the people her husband had murdered. She named King Duncan. "Who would have thought the old man had so much blood?" she said. Then she talked about Lady Macduff. "The Thane of Fife had a wife. Where is she now? Will these hands never be clean?" she cried. Finally, she talked about Banquo. "Don't be afraid," she said. "Banquo is in his grave and cannot come out. You are safe." The doctor was amazed at what he heard, but Lady Macbeth still had more to say. "My hands will never be clean," she complained. "They smell like blood. All the perfume in the world cannot take the smell away." She went back to her bed. The doctor and the servant looked at each other. "You know things that you should not know," said the doctor. The frightened servant agreed. She had said things that she should not say. "This is a disease that I cannot cure," expressed the doctor. The English soldiers were helping Macduff and Malcolm fight against Macbeth. They marched to Burnham Forest, and Macbeth returned to the castle at Dunsinane. He prepared his soldiers to fight against the enemy, but he was not very worried. He remembered what the witches had told him. "Nobody who is born of a woman shall harm Macbeth," they had said. "How can that boy Malcolm hurt me?" asked Macbeth. "He was born of a woman." When a messenger told him there were 10,000 soldiers with Malcolm and Macduff, Macbeth sent him away. "I will not be afraid of death until Burnham Forest comes up the hill to Dunsinane Castle," he told himself, remembering the message of the boy with the crown on his head. Malcolm and his 10,000 soldiers arrived at Burnham Forest. They could see Dunsinane Castle on top of the hill. There were no trees between the forest and the castle. If the soldiers went toward the castle, the guards at the castle would see them. Malcolm decided each soldier should cut down a branch from a tree and carry it across the open ground. That way, the guards at the castle could not see how many soldiers there were. Macbeth was waiting for the enemy to attack his castle when he heard the sound of women crying. His wife was dead. She had killed herself. Macbeth was sad and angry at the futility of life. "Life is too short," he said. "It is like a candle that burns out too soon. It is like a shadow that behaves like an important man, but it is a fool and is soon gone. Life is a story told by an idiot. It has no meaning." He was interrupted by a messenger who told him he saw Burnham Forest coming up the hill towards Dunsinane Castle. Of course, these were the soldiers carrying their branches, but the messenger did not know this. Macbeth was alarmed because this is what the witches had told him would happen. Malcolm told his soldiers to throw down their branches and attack the castle. Macbeth came out of the castle and began to fight. He killed one of the soldiers. "He was born of a woman," said Macbeth. "He could not harm me." Macduff was looking for Macbeth. He wanted to kill him because Macbeth had killed his wife and children. When he found Macbeth, Macbeth did not want to fight him because he had already killed his wife and children and did not want to kill any more Macduffs. However, Macduff began to fight him. "Don't be a fool," laughed Macbeth. "I have a charmed life. I cannot be harmed by anybody who is born of a woman." "That's nonsense," shouted Macduff. "I was not born. I was taken from my mother's womb before my time." Now Macbeth knew he would be defeated. He fought against Macduff, but Macduff won the fight and killed him. He brought Macbeth's head to Malcolm to show him the battle had been won. "Hail, King of Scotland!" he shouted. "Hail, King Malcolm!" shouted all the soldiers. That is how Malcolm became the King of Scotland. He was a good king, and soon all the good people who had fled from Scotland during Macbeth's reign began to return. Scotland was at peace. The Tragedy of King Lear. Chapter 1. how much do you love me?" We usually think that old men are wise, especially if they are important men like kings. But this is not always true. Some old men are very foolish. The story of King Lear is the story of a foolish old man. He was the king of England and was very rich and powerful. He realized, however, that he was getting old. Being a king was difficult. There was so much to do. Every day there were many small problems for him to solve. Sometimes there were big problems to solve. He had to travel to the different parts of his kingdom. He had to have feasts for his lords and his other friends. He had to talk to other kings about their lands. It was all too much at his age, he thought. King Lear had no sons, but he had 3 daughters. The oldest was Goneril, who was married to the Duke of Albany. The next was Regan, who was married to the Duke of Cornwall. The youngest was Cordelia, who was the king's favorite. She was not married, but the Duke of Burgundy and the King of France both wanted to marry her and were waiting for the king's decision. King Lear decided he would divide his kingdom among his 3 daughters and let them take care of the business and problems that bothered him so much now that he was old. He wanted to rest a while at the end of his life. He thought if he divided the kingdom among them before he died, it would prevent the sisters and their husbands from fighting about it later. He called his daughters and their husbands and told them what he intended to do. "But first," said this foolish old man, "I want each of my daughters to tell me how much she loves me, so that I can give the biggest part to the one who loves me most. Goneril, you are the oldest, so you may speak first." Goneril told her father that words could not describe her love. He was more important to her than her eyes, her freedom, her beauty, or even her life. No child ever loved a father so much, she said. The king was pleased. He invited Regan to speak next. Regan told her father that she was like her sister. She loved him just as much and even more. She considered every other pleasure an enemy of her love for him, she said. Again, the king was pleased. He turned to Cordelia. "And you, Cordelia, what can you say to get a bigger share of the kingdom than your sisters?" He expected that his favorite daughter would say even better things than her sisters had. However, he was disappointed. Cordelia knew she loved her father more than her sisters did, but she did not like to talk about it. So when he asked her what she would say, this was her answer. "Nothing, my lord." "Nothing?" asked the foolish king. "Nothing," repeated Cordelia. "Nothing will come of nothing," said the king. "Speak again." "I am sorry," apologized Cordelia. "I cannot put my heart in my mouth. I love you as a daughter should love her father, no more, no less." King Lear was not happy with his daughter's answer. The more he thought about it, the less he liked it. He became angry. He became so angry that he decided to give Cordelia nothing. He divided her share between the other 2 sisters. The Duke of Kent, a wise and loyal follower of the king, heard this and tried to tell King Lear that he was making a mistake. However, the king would not listen and sent Kent out of the country. Then the king told the Duke of Burgundy and the King of France what he had done. As soon as Burgundy realized Cordelia would not have any land or money, he decided he did not want to marry her after all. The King of France, however, thought Cordelia had given a good answer to her father. He said he would marry her. King Lear told the King of France that he could have Cordelia to be his wife. "She is not my daughter," he declared. Cordelia didn't trust her sisters, but begged them to look after her father. The sisters themselves were surprised at what the king had done. They knew Cordelia was his favorite and could not understand why she and the Duke of Kent were suddenly banished. They decided to help each other. Goneril would look after their father for 1 month, and then Regan would look after him the next month. The Duke of Kent, banished by the king, had a loyal friend, who was the Duke of Gloucester. Gloucester had 2 sons, Edmund and Edgar. Edgar was his father's favorite and would inherit all the land. Edmund was greedy and made a plan to get the land for himself. He wrote a letter to himself, copying his brother's handwriting. He made sure he was reading it when his father came into the room. He put it away quickly, but his father saw it, as Edmund had intended. "What was that letter?" asked Gloucester. "Nothing," answered Edmund. "Then why did you put it away so quickly? Show it to me." "It is a letter from my brother, but I have not finished reading it." "Show it to me." Edmund handed over the letter, and Gloucester read it. "Edmund, if you help me kill our father," it said, "I will give you half the land. Edgar." Gloucester was very upset and angry. He wanted to punish Edgar immediately, but Edmund persuaded him to be patient. Edmund found Edgar and warned him that his father was angry with him. "Somebody has told him lies about me," shouted Edgar. "I am afraid so," answered Edmund. Privately, Edmund laughed at his brother and father. "They are too honest," he said to himself, "and I will get all the land." Chapter 2. This is how much we love you. The Duke of Kent, meanwhile, did not leave England, although that is what the king had ordered him to do. He disguised himself as a poor man and became a servant of the king. King Lear went to stay with Goneril, but he was rude to the servants, and Goneril told the servants to be rude to him. They were. They would not come to him when he called them. They would not bring his dinner when he ordered it. Even Goneril would not come to him when he asked. King Lear was annoyed. When Oswald, one of the servants, spoke rudely to him, he struck him. Kent also struck Oswald and sent him out of the room. The king had a fool who used to tell him jokes. Now this fool began to tell him he was a foolish man for giving his land away to his 2 daughters. "You have turned your daughters into your mothers and given them a stick to hit you with," he said. When Goneril finally came to talk to her father, she complained that his retinue was behaving badly. Her palace, she said, seemed to be more like a hotel where people drank too much. "You are old and should be wise," she said, "but you have a drunken retinue of men who make trouble wherever they go." She sent most of his retinue away. This made King Lear angry. He said some terrible things to his daughter. He hoped she would never have children because she was an ungrateful daughter. In tears, he called for his horses. He was determined to go to Regan's palace and stay with her. He was certain she would be a more loving daughter. Goneril's husband Albany did not like the way she treated her father, but it was too late to stop her. Goneril quickly wrote a letter to her sister Regan and told her what had happened. She was sure Regan would not allow King Lear to have his retinue at her palace either. The letter said she should make sure she was not at home if their father wanted to come and stay with her. She told Oswald to take the letter to Regan. King Lear also wrote a letter to Regan and her husband Cornwall, telling them that he was coming to stay with them. He told Kent to take it to Regan. Kent was faster than Oswald, so he arrived there first. Regan was reading the letter from her father when Oswald arrived with the letter from Goneril. When Regan read her sister's letter, she called her horses and left the palace, ordering Kent to go with her and her husband, and wait for the answer to her father's letter. Then they went to the Duke of Gloucester's palace. Edmund, the son of the Duke of Gloucester, had convinced his father that his brother Edgar wanted to kill his father. He told Edgar to be careful because his father was very angry with him, although he did not know the reason. He told him to flee the country. He made certain that Gloucester saw him talk to Edgar. Then he cut himself with his sword and told his father that Edgar had done it. Gloucester was furious and said that Edgar was no longer his son. He told everybody that if they could find Edgar and kill him, they would get a reward. He promised all the land to Edmund. When Edgar heard about this, he decided to disguise himself as a beggar and call himself Poor Tom. When the Duke of Cornwall arrived at Gloucester's palace with his wife Regan and his retinue, he heard about the rebellion of Edgar. Regan promised that Cornwall would help Gloucester find Edgar. She said it was terrible for parents to have ungrateful children. The Duke of Kent, still disguised as a servant of the king, saw Oswald and began to fight him. He called Oswald terrible names, and Oswald cried out for help. This brought Cornwall, Gloucester, Regan, and Edmund running. Cornwall questioned the two men and decided to punish Kent by putting him in the stocks. Putting the king's messenger in the stocks was a terrible insult to the king. Gloucester tried to stop Cornwall. Cornwall, however, listened to his wife Regan and put the Duke of Kent in the stocks. King Lear arrived at Cornwall's palace and was told the Duke and Regan had gone to visit Gloucester. The king could not understand why they had left and why they had not sent his messenger back. He decided to go to Gloucester as well. When he arrived, he saw Kent in the stocks. "What are you doing there?" he asked, surprised. "I've been sleeping," replied Kent. "Who put you there?" demanded the king. "Your daughter and her husband," answered Kent. Then he told him about his fight with Oswald. The king was terribly insulted. "How do they dare do this?" he exclaimed. He went to find his daughter, but she refused to see him. She said she was too tired. The king could not believe his ears. "I am the king. I will speak to the Duke of Cornwall, and I will speak to my daughter. I am her father, and I will have my messenger freed from the stocks." Gloucester went to speak to Regan, and finally she and her husband came to see the king. As soon as he saw her, the king began to complain about Goneril, but Regan defended her. She told her father to go back to Goneril and ask her to forgive him. The king begged Regan to let him stay with her, but she refused. "Return to my sister," urged Regan. "Never," cried the king. "She sent away most of my retinue and insulted me. I will not go back." Then he cursed Goneril. "But I will never curse you," he added, "because you are kinder and more loving than your sister." While they were still talking, Goneril arrived. Albany, however, was not with her. "Here she is," said Regan. "I am sure she will allow you to return if you dismiss half your retinue. Then next month you can come to me. I am not at home now and not ready to care for you properly. Return to my sister." "I will not do it," shouted the king. "I would rather live in the forest with the wolf and the owl. I would rather beg the King of France for some food." "It's your choice," answered Goneril. "You are my daughter," the king told her. "But you are more like a disease. I will not come to you. I will stay with all my retinue at Regan's palace." "I have already told you that you cannot," stated Regan. "Your retinue is too large. Even half is too many. You can only stay with me if you dismiss 3/4 of your retinue. I cannot give you any more than that." "But I gave you everything you have," moaned the king. "Goneril, I'll go with you, for at least I may have half my retinue." "No, my lord," said Goneril. "Regan is right. You do not need a large retinue. In fact, you do not need a retinue at all." "That's right," agreed Regan. "You don't need a retinue at all." King Lear was more upset than ever. He told his daughters they were unnatural witches and went into the forest just as it began to rain. "I have a small palace," Regan said to her sister. "There is no room for him." "It's his own fault," agreed Goneril. "He should dismiss his retinue." The rain soon became a powerful storm with strong winds and thunder and lightning. Gloucester wanted to run after the king and invite him back inside, but Regan and Goneril convinced him not to do that. "He'll make a lot of trouble," said Regan. "He needs to learn a lesson," added Goneril. "Lock your doors, Gloucester," advised Cornwall. "It's going to be a bad storm." Chapter 3. The Fairies in the Forest. The Duke of Kent, still disguised as a servant, received a letter from Cordelia. The King of France had heard that Cornwall and Albany were about to fight each other, so that one of them would become King of England. The King of France had decided to send an army to England to help King Lear. Kent gave his ring to a messenger and told him to go to Dover and give it to Cordelia when she arrived there. Meanwhile, the angry King Lear was out in the wild storm at night. He was so angry with his daughters that his anger was like a storm in his head and his heart. "My daughters are worse than this storm," he said in despair. "They make me feel old and weak and despised. The storm can do no worse. What have I done to deserve this curse?" He shivered. He was wet and cold and hungry. He had no shelter from the rain. Gloucester received a letter. It told him Cornwall and Albany were about to fight, and the King of France was coming to help King Lear. He told Edmund about this letter, and then said he would go and find the king and help him. He thought King Lear would be happy to hear that Cordelia and her husband, the King of France, were coming to help him. "His daughters told me to lock him out in the storm," he said. "That's terrible. How can they treat their father so badly?" said treacherous Edmund. "I will go and find the king," said Gloucester. "Don't tell anyone about this letter. They may kill me for helping him." Edmund, of course, decided to tell the Duke of Cornwall about it as soon as he could. If his father died, all the lands would be his. The Duke of Kent found King Lear and took him to a nearby hut. "I'll go and talk to your daughters," he suggested, "and try to make them show some pity." He asked King Lear to go into the hut. At first, the king refused. "I do not need shelter from the storm," he said. "There is a much worse storm inside me." Again and again the Duke of Kent asked him to go in. Finally he agreed. Inside they found a beggar who called himself Poor Tom and acted like a mad person. This was Edgar, of course, disguised as a beggar. King Lear heard him talk like a mad person and wondered if he had daughters too, who had made him mad. He cursed the beggar's daughters, but Kent told him the beggar had no daughters. King Lear refused to believe this. "Only ungrateful daughters can make a man so mad," he exclaimed. Suddenly, they saw the light of a torch. It was Gloucester searching for the king. He did not recognize that Poor Tom was his son Edgar. He was very sorry that King Lear had to listen to a madman like him. "Come with me," he told the king. "I cannot obey your daughters any longer. I will find a warm room and some food for you." But King Lear would not leave his new friend Poor Tom. Kent persuaded Gloucester to allow Poor Tom to come to the palace too. At the palace, Edmund told the Duke of Cornwall about his father's letter. The King of France was coming to invade England, he said, and his father was going to help him. "Your brother Edgar was right to rebel against him then," said Cornwall. "We must find your father and stop him." Gloucester brought King Lear, Kent, and Poor Tom to a warm, dry place and went to find some food for them. He returned with the news that there was a plot to kill the king. "Hurry!" he shouted to Kent. "Take the king and flee to Dover. There you will find people to protect him and keep him safe." By now, the Duke of Cornwall had told Regan and Goneril of Gloucester's treachery. They all wanted to kill him. They were afraid their sister Cordelia, who was married to the King of France, would become the Queen of all England. And Gloucester wanted to help her. "Hang him immediately!" exclaimed Regan. "Pull out his eyes!" shouted Goneril. Gloucester did not know that Edmund had told the Duke of Cornwall about the letter. He came into the palace and the guards seized him. They tied him onto a chair and Regan pulled his beard. "You are a traitor!" she hissed. Cornwall asked him questions about the letter and about King Lear. "I sent him to Dover because I did not want to see his daughters treat him so badly," spoke Gloucester sadly. "You will never see his daughters treat him badly again," shouted Cornwall. He pulled out one of Gloucester's eyes, threw it on the floor, and stamped on it. A servant tried to fight Cornwall and wounded him with a sword, but Regan stabbed the servant in the back and killed him. Cornwall pulled out Gloucester's other eye. Gloucester cried out for his son Edmund. Regan laughed. "It was he who told us of your treachery," she yelled. Gloucester realized Edmund had lied to him and tricked him. Edgar was not trying to kill him after all. However, it was too late now. Cornwall told the servants to throw the blind old Gloucester out of the palace. Edgar, still disguised as a beggar, saw his father talking to an old man who offered to help him. "You cannot see where you are going," said the old man. "I have nowhere to go, and therefore do not need to see," replied Gloucester. He was very upset and told the old man that he had been wrong about his son Edgar. He only wished that he could touch him again. Edgar stepped forward and spoke to his father, but did not reveal who he was. Gloucester sent the old man to get some clothes for poor Tom, and then asked Tom to take him to Dover. "There is a cliff that rises very high," he said. "Bring me to the very top of it, and I will repair any sadness you have. Lead me to this cliff, and you will not have to lead me from it." Chapter 4. The Battle and its Victims. Goneril returned to her palace with Edmund. Oswald told her that her husband Albany did not agree with what she had done, and was happy to hear that the French king was now in Dover. Goneril sent Edmund back to help the Duke of Cornwall. She thought he was a better man than her own husband. When Albany saw his wife, they had a huge argument. He said she was cruel and worthless. She said he was a coward who did not know what was best for him. As they argued, a messenger arrived to tell them the Duke of Cornwall had died from the wounds he received from his servant while pulling out Gloucester's eyes. Goneril was worried that Regan, who was now a widow, might try and marry Edmund. She wrote letters to Regan and Edmund. Albany found out that Edmund has betrayed his father. He decided he should help Gloucester and the king. However, Goneril took control of his army and set out for Dover to help Regan and Edmund. Cordelia arrived in Dover with the French army. She could hear her father singing madly in the fields and sent men to go and find him. She got the army ready to meet the armies of Regan and Edmund. Oswald went to Regan with Goneril's letter. Regan was worried about Gloucester because people felt sorry for him and supported him. She thought they should have killed him instead of making him blind. Oswald wanted to deliver Goneril's letter to Edmund, but Regan tried to stop him. "I know that Goneril wants him," she thought, "but I am a widow. It is better that I should have him." Edgar was still leading his blind father. "Are we near the cliff yet?" asked Gloucester. "Yes. Notice how steep it is here." "It seems flat to me." "And if you listen, you can hear the sea." "I can't hear it." "Then you are growing deaf too." "That may be true. I think your voice is changing." "I am the same." Gloucester still did not realize that poor Tom was really his son Edgar. Edgar told him he was on the edge of a cliff, and Gloucester fell forwards fainting. When Gloucester regained consciousness, Edgar pretended to be somebody else and told Gloucester that he had just fallen from a high cliff. He said he could not understand why he was not dead. He wasn't even wounded. "It's a miracle!" exclaimed Edgar. As they were speaking, King Lear approached, wearing a crown made of weeds and flowers. Edgar recognized him, and Gloucester recognized his voice. The king was talking like a madman, speaking nonsense. Cordelia's men found him behaving like this and tried to take him to Cordelia, but he ran away from them. Edgar spoke a while longer with his father, and Oswald saw them. He wanted to kill Gloucester and get a reward from Regan, but Edgar knocked him down and killed him. Before he died, he begged Edgar to give the letters he had in his pocket to Edmund. Edgar read the letters and found one from Goneril asking Edmund to kill her husband, Albany. Then she would be a widow too, and she could marry Edmund. Cordelia met with Kent, and then with her father, King Lear. He thought Cordelia was a ghost. "I know you don't love me," he complained. "Your sisters have behaved badly with me. They have no reason to do so, but you do." However, Cordelia was pleased to see her father and spoke very kindly to him. Goneril and Albany arrived with their army, determined to fight against the French and keep the lands that King Lear had given them. Albany did not want the French to invade England, but at the same time, he was loyal to King Lear. Goneril and Regan both wanted to marry Edmund, and he didn't know what to do. He decided to wait until after the battle with the French. Then, if Alpiny was still alive, he would leave it up to Goneril to kill him. Then he would decide which of the two sisters he should marry. The English armies defeated the French in the battle, and King Lear and Cordelia were taken captive. Edmund put them in prison and told a captain in the army that he should murder them. He was to hang Cordelia and make it look like she had hanged herself. Then he would stab King Lear and make it look like he had killed himself too. The captain agreed to do it. Goneril, meanwhile, was worried that her sister Regan would marry Edmund. She gave her some poison. Regan made Edmund the Duke of Cornwall, but she began to feel ill and went to bed. Alpiny read his wife's letter to Edmund. He arrested Edmund for treason. He called Edgar, and the two brothers fought. Edgar won, but he did not kill Edmund. He took off his disguise so that everyone could see who he really was. His old father Gloucester, when he realized the beggar was his son, was so happy that his heart burst and he died. Goneril, seeing that Alpiny had her letter, rushed away. A short time later, a soldier came in with a bloody knife. "Goneril told me that she poisoned Regan," he said, "and then she killed herself with this knife." The Duke of Kent asked where King Lear was, and Edmund, feeling sorry for all the trouble he had caused, told them what he had ordered the captain to do. Alpiny ordered the guards to put Edmund in prison. They were about to rush out to stop the captain when King Lear came in, carrying Cordelia dead in his arms. He was full of grief and anger. He told them that he had killed the man who had hanged her. A messenger arrived to tell them Edmund had died of the wounds he received in his fight with Edgar. King Lear thought he saw Cordelia breathe, and the hope that she was alive made him so happy that, like Gloucester, his heart broke and he died. Although the Duke of Kent loved his king, he was not sad at his death. "His life was so sad that it would be cruel to make it longer," he commented. The Tragedy of Hamlet. Chapter 1. The Ghost's Message. Horatio did not believe in ghosts. When two guards at King Claudius's castle at Elsinore in Denmark told him that they had seen one, he took little notice. A few days later, however, they came and told him they had seen it again. They begged him to come and look, and finally he agreed. He came to them late one night, while they were on guard near the castle gate. He saw the ghost. There could be no doubt. It was the ghost of the former King Hamlet. He asked the ghost to speak to him, but just as it was about to say something, a rooster crowed and the ghost disappeared. Horatio thought he should tell his friend Prince Hamlet. He and the prince studied together in Wittenberg. Prince Hamlet was the son of the former King Hamlet. King Hamlet had been bitten by a snake while sleeping in an orchard and died. His brother Claudius had married his widow Gertrude and became the king in his place. Prince Hamlet was still very sad about his father's death, but Claudius told him that he had to accept it and be cheerful. "You should look on me as your new father," urged Claudius. Hamlet's mother Gertrude agreed. "Everything that lives has to die," she said. "It is time to stop mourning and wearing black clothes. Life must go on." Prince Hamlet did not like his uncle, and certainly did not like thinking of him as his new father. "There is another reason," added Claudius. "Fortinbras, the nephew of the King of Norway, is getting ready to invade us. If we are sad, he will think we are weak. We must seem strong and happy. I have written to the King of Norway to try and stop his nephew. However, the king is very old, and he may not succeed. We must be ready for battle if necessary." His mother asked him not to return to Wittenberg to study, but to stay with them in Elsinore. Prince Hamlet agreed to do as his mother asked, but he was not happy. His father, who had been an excellent king, had died 2 months before. His mother had married his father's brother just 1 month after his father's death. The prince thought this was wrong. He was so unhappy about this that he wanted to die. However, he was happy to see his good friend Horatio. "Why are you in Elsinore?" he asked. "You should be studying in Wittenberg." "I came to honor your father at his funeral," answered Horatio. "Or did you come for my mother's wedding?" asked Hamlet. Well, yes, they were very close together, weren't they? Commented Horatio. They were so close together that the leftover food from the funeral was served at the wedding, said Hamlet. I thought I saw your father last night, said Horatio. What? Exclaimed Hamlet. My father? Just listen to this, said Horatio. You'll be amazed. He called the two guards and they told Hamlet what they had seen. Did you see it too? Hamlet asked Horatio. I did, replied Horatio. Did you speak to it? Asked Hamlet. I did, replied Horatio. And it was about to speak to me, but the rooster crowed and it disappeared. Was it armed? Yes, it was. Did you see its face? Yes, I did. Was it angry or sad? Sad. Did it look at you? Yes, it did. I wish I had been there, exclaimed Hamlet. I shall come and watch with you tonight. Do not tell anybody about this. Hamlet had another friend. Her name was Ophelia, and she loved him. Ophelia was the daughter of Polonius, who helped King Claudius rule the kingdom. She and her brother Laertes lived in the castle with their father. Laertes was going to Paris to study. Before he left, he warned Ophelia that she should stay away from Hamlet. But he loves me, argued Ophelia. He may love you now, remarked Laertes, but don't forget that he is a prince and will not be allowed to choose his own wife. Ophelia agreed that this was good advice. Her father also advised her not to listen to Hamlet if he told her that he loved her. He is young, Polonius pointed out. You should not trust him. Please, do not talk to him any more. Ophelia was an obedient daughter and agreed to do what her father said. That night, Hamlet went to meet Horatio and one of the guards near the gate of the castle. Hamlet began to complain about the behavior of his uncle, but was interrupted by the appearance of his father's ghost. Hamlet was amazed and frightened to see the ghost. He wanted to know why the ghost came to see them. There must be a very important reason, he said. What is it? The ghost did not speak, but signaled Hamlet to follow it. Don't go, warned Horatio and the guard. Who knows what the ghost will do to you? I will go, agreed Hamlet. I am not afraid, for I do not care if I live or die. The ghost kept signaling Hamlet to follow it. Horatio and the guard held on to Hamlet to try and stop him, but he told them to let him go. Finally, they let him go, and Hamlet followed the ghost. Horatio and the guard decided to follow it too. The ghost told Hamlet that it was his father's spirit. I am free to walk at night, it said, but during the day I must suffer in the fires of hell. This will continue until the terrible crimes committed during my life are purged. You must avenge my murder. Murder? Exclaimed Hamlet. Terrible, unnatural murder, exclaimed the ghost. Tell me quickly, urged Hamlet, so that I can avenge it. Listen, son, the only snake that bit me is now wearing my crown. My uncle! Exclaimed Hamlet. My brother, said the ghost. Fell in love with my wife, your mother. He found me asleep in the orchard one day and poured poison into my ears. He is the snake. His poison entered my blood and killed me. It was a horrible death. You must avenge it, but be sure that you do not harm your mother. You must leave her for God to judge. Hamlet was appalled to learn the truth about his father's death. He swore that he would take revenge against Claudius. Morning was near, and the ghost disappeared. Horatio and the guard found him and asked him what the ghost had said. Hamlet would not tell them because he was afraid they would tell other people. They begged him and promised never to tell anyone, but he still would not say anything about it. Then he asked them to swear that they would never say anything about the ghost at all. They did. Then Hamlet told them that he was going to pretend to be mad, so that he could spy on his mother and uncle. Then he would be able to discover the best way to take revenge on Claudius. He made Horatio and the guards swear that they would never do anything, to show that they knew he was pretending. Chapter 2. The Prince is Mad. In those days, young men often became mad if they were refused by the girl they loved. Hamlet decided to use this to make his madness seem natural. He began to dress and act like a madman. He undid the buttons on his jacket, took off his hat, made his trousers dirty, and let his socks go down to his ankles. Dressed like this, he went to Ophelia. He made his knees knock together and made his face as ugly as possible. He took hold of Ophelia's arm and would not let it go. He stared into her eyes. He held her for a long time. Then he shook her inside. He seemed very sad. Then he let go of her arm. He put his head on one shoulder and walked out of the room backward. Ophelia was very surprised and wondered what was wrong with him. She went to her father Polonius and told him what had happened. Polonius asked her if she had spoken to Hamlet recently. She replied that she had been obedient to her father and not spoken to Hamlet at all. Polonius decided this was the cause of Hamlet's madness. "This means that he really does love you," he told Ophelia. "We had better go and tell the king." The king and the queen were worried about Hamlet's strange behavior. Hamlet's mother thought Hamlet was mad because of his father's death and her sudden marriage to Claudius. The king was not sure. They called two of Hamlet's oldest friends, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and asked for their help. They wanted these friends to spy on Hamlet and report to them if they could find out why he was behaving strangely. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern agreed to help because they thought they were helping Hamlet and because the king promised them a lot of money for helping him. The king was happy because he received news from Norway that the king of Norway had stopped his young nephew from invading Denmark. This was good news. The king of Norway had persuaded his nephew to attack the Poles instead. In return for not invading Denmark, the young nephew asked only that he be allowed to pass through Denmark on his way to attack the Poles. After receiving this good news, the king and queen listened to Polonius. He told them Hamlet's madness was due to Ophelia's rejection of his love. He himself was to blame for making Ophelia refuse him. "Do you think this might be true?" Claudius asked Gertrude. "It might be," she replied. Polonius reminded them that Hamlet often walked in the same place for a while every day. He said he would send his daughter to be there then, and he and the king should hide and listen to the two young people speak. Then they would find out whether it was true or not. King Claudius agreed to try it, but just then Hamlet came into the room reading a book. Polonius convinced Claudius and Gertrude to allow him to speak to Hamlet alone. Hamlet, still pretending to be mad, told Polonius he thought he was a seller of fish. Polonius was easily fooled by this. "What are you reading?" he asked. "Words, words, words," replied Hamlet. Polonius was convinced he was mad and went to find Ophelia and arrange for her to meet him. Hamlet thought Polonius was a very boring old fool and secretly laughed at him. When Rosencrantz and Guildenstern found Hamlet, he asked them why they were at Elsinore. "To visit you," they answered. Hamlet immediately guessed that the king and queen had sent for them, and when he asked them, they confessed. He went on to tell them he was feeling very sad and could find nothing to make him happy. The two friends told him they had arranged for a group of actors to come and entertain him. This made Hamlet feel happier. He welcomed Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and shook their hands. He told them that the king and queen did not understand that he was only sometimes mad, depending on the direction of the wind. Polonius announced the arrival of the actors. Hamlet knew these actors because he had often seen them perform. He was happy to see them. He asked one of them to perform a speech that he had heard him perform before. It was from a play that told the story of a man whose father was murdered. Polonius enjoyed the acting. Hamlet asked him to take the actors to some rooms and feed them. He promised that they would perform a play the next day. "Can you play the murder of Gonzago?" he asked. They said they could, and he asked them to include an extra scene that he would write and give to them. Hamlet's plan was to make the actors tell the story of his father's murder by Claudius. He believed that Claudius, seeing the play, would be upset and accidentally show that he was guilty. Chapter 3. Hamlet's Girlfriend and Hamlet's Mother. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern reported to the king and queen and told them they could not find out why Hamlet was mad. "We have arranged for some actors to perform for him tonight, and this has made him happy," reported Rosencrantz. "He wants you to come and see the play with him," added Guildenstern. King Claudius and Queen Gertrude agreed to come. Then it was time for Claudius and Polonius to hide and listen to the conversation between Ophelia and Hamlet. Polonius told Ophelia where to sit. "Read your book," he recommended, "for this will help you look lonely. We often disguise our bad intentions by seeming innocent." These words struck Claudius, who was feeling guilty for killing his brother, but he said nothing. They heard Hamlet coming. Ophelia quickly sat down and pretended to read her book. Claudius and Polonius quickly hid. Hamlet was talking to himself, wondering whether it was better to live or to die. Should we face our troubles and fight them, he wondered, or should we die only to face troubles that we know nothing about? It was a difficult question. When he saw Ophelia, she asked him to take back the gifts he had given her. He denied he had ever given her gifts or that he had ever loved her. "You told me you loved me," she said. "You should not have believed me," he told her. "All men are liars. Don't marry a man. All women are liars too. You cannot believe what they say. It would be much better if there were no more marriages." He stormed away from Ophelia, who was left very upset. Her good Prince Hamlet, who used to love her, was now mad and useless. King Claudius, who had heard the conversation between them, told Polonius that he did not think the problem was love. He decided to send Hamlet to England for a change. Perhaps that would make him feel better. Polonius agreed, but still thought it was Hamlet's love for Ophelia that made him mad. He wanted Gertrude to speak to Hamlet while he listened in secret. Perhaps he would tell his mother about his problem. Claudius agreed. Hamlet gave the extra lines he wrote for the play to the actors and told them how to perform them. Then he told Horatio to watch carefully when that part of the play was performed. If Claudius looked guilty, they would know that the ghost was right, and Hamlet would take revenge. Everybody came to watch the play. Gertrude wanted Hamlet to sit with her, but he refused and sat with Ophelia instead. The play began with silent actors. A king and queen kissed and hugged each other. Then the king lay down to sleep. The queen left him. Another man came in and poured poison in the king's ear. The queen returned and found him dead. She began to cry. The poisoner returned and pretended to be the queen's friend. He bought her some gifts, and then she agreed to marry him. When the pantomime was finished, the actors began to perform the play. It was also about a king and queen who were in love. Once again, the king was poisoned when somebody poured poison into his ear while he slept. When King Claudius saw this part of the play, he stood up and left. The play stopped, and everybody left. Hamlet and Horatio agreed this action revealed that the king was guilty, and the ghost was right. Queen Gertrude sent Rosencrantz and Guildenstern to Hamlet to tell him the king was angry and she wanted to talk to Hamlet that evening. Rosencrantz tried again to find out why Hamlet was behaving like a madman. But Hamlet knew he was trying to help the king and would not tell him. A few moments later, Polonius also came to Hamlet with a message from the queen, asking him to come and see her as soon as possible. Hamlet promised to come soon. Rosencrantz and Guildenstern returned to King Claudius. He told them he did not like the way that Hamlet was behaving, and he wanted them to take him to England as soon as possible. They agreed to help the king by doing this. Polonius came and told the king that Hamlet was going to see his mother. "I'll hide in the room, and then I will be able to tell you what they talk about," he said. "I'm sure he will tell her why he is behaving strangely." Claudius thanked him, but as soon as he was alone again, he began to think about his evil deeds. He knew he had done the wrong thing, and he was guilty. He wanted to pray for forgiveness, but he knew he could not because he still enjoyed the things he got by murdering his brother. He had the crown of Denmark and his brother's wife. He thought that God could not forgive him, but he fell to his knees and began to pray anyway. Hamlet came in behind him and realized this was a perfect chance to kill his father's murderer. He took out his sword, but then he thought again. "If I kill him while he is praying, he will go straight to heaven," he thought. I will wait until he is drunk and asleep. If I kill him then, he will not be accepted in heaven." He put away his sword and went to his mother's room. Polonius was hiding behind a curtain. "What's the matter, mother?" asked Hamlet. "You have offended your father," she replied. "And you have offended mine," said Hamlet. Queen Gertrude was surprised. "Have you forgotten who I am?" she asked. "Not at all," replied Hamlet. "You are your husband's brother's wife and my mother. Sit down. I will not let you go until you see what you are really like." Gertrude was afraid. She called out for help. Polonius behind the curtain also called out for help. Hamlet took out his sword and stabbed the curtain. Polonius screamed. "What have you done?" cried Queen Gertrude. "I don't know," replied Hamlet. "Was it the king?" "That was a bloody and evil thing to do," continued the queen. "Almost as evil as killing a king and marrying his brother," answered Hamlet. "Killing a king?" asked his surprised mother. "Yes, that's what I said," replied Hamlet. "Killing a king." Hamlet realized he had killed Polonius and not Claudius. He was surprised but not disappointed. "Stupid old man," he cried. He showed his mother 2 pictures. One was of his father, the dead King Hamlet. The other was of his brother, King Claudius. He told her how much better his father was than his uncle. "How could you learn to love him?" he shouted. "He is a bad, bad man. He is a murderer." "Stop! Stop!" cried his mother. "I cannot hear another word." The ghost of King Hamlet appeared, but she could not see it. The ghost reminded Hamlet he was not to hurt his mother, and he must not forget the most important part of his revenge. "What are you doing?" asked Gertrude. "Why are you talking to the air? What are you looking at?" "At him! At him! Can't you see him? Can't you hear him?" shouted the prince. "I can't see or hear anybody," answered the queen. "It's my father! My father! He's going!" cried Hamlet. This was true. The ghost disappeared. "Now I know that you are mad," said the queen. Hamlet turned to her. "No, mother, I am not mad. Don't use that as an excuse to hide your bad deeds. Please, think about what you are doing and stop it." Then he seized the body of Polonius and dragged it out of the room with him. When the queen told her husband that Hamlet had killed Polonius while he was hiding behind the curtain, the king became afraid for his own life and for the queen. He told her he would send Hamlet away as soon as possible. He called Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and told them to go and find Hamlet and to bring Polonius's body for a proper burial. Hamlet, however, hid the body, and they could not find it. They brought Hamlet to the king, and he finally revealed that he had put the body under the stairs. Claudius told Hamlet a boat was ready to take him to England. Hamlet agreed to go. Claudius wrote a letter asking the English king to kill Hamlet. He gave it to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern and asked them to go with Hamlet to England. They were told to give the letter to the English king, but they did not know what was in the letter. Claudius believed he could never be happy while Hamlet was alive. As this was happening, Fortinbras, the young nephew of the King of Norway, began his march through Denmark on his way to attack the Poles. Chapter 4. An Evil Plot Goes Wrong. Ophelia was upset by the death of her father and the sudden disappearance of Hamlet. She was so upset that she became mad. She sang silly songs and talked nonsense to anybody who would listen. Her brother Laertes returned from Paris to avenge the death of his father. When he saw his sister behaving strangely, he became angrier. He demanded that Claudius tell him how his father had died. Claudius told him that he should not worry. He had not killed Polonius and would help him seek revenge. "Hamlet killed him," he told Laertes, "but it is difficult to punish him as he deserves. His mother would be very upset, and he is very popular in Denmark." "So there will be no revenge?" asked Laertes. "Be patient. You will hear more later," replied the king. However, the king's plans were not going well. On his first night on the ship, Hamlet could not sleep. He went to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern's room and found the letter Claudius had written to the King of England. The letter asked the King of England to kill Hamlet as soon as possible. Hamlet stole the letter and replaced it with a new one, which asked the King of England to kill Rosencrantz and Guildenstern instead. On the second night of the voyage, the ship was attacked by pirates. They captured Hamlet, but everybody else escaped and continued to England. The pirates took Hamlet back to Denmark. There he wrote a letter to Horatio telling him what had happened, and another to King Claudius. Horatio immediately went to meet Hamlet. When the king read that Hamlet had returned, he plotted with Laertes to kill him. Laertes would challenge Hamlet to a duel and scratch him with his sword. However, the sword would have poison on its tip, and this would kill Hamlet. If this plan failed, the king would make sure that Hamlet had poison in his drink. Ophelia, in her madness, made strings of flowers and threw them in a river. She fell in the river and began to sing. Her clothes became heavy in the water and dragged her down, and she drowned. While Claudius and Laertes were making their plans for Hamlet's death, the queen told them the news. Laertes was very upset, and Claudius was worried that he might do something stupid. Hamlet and Horatio, returning to Elsinore, saw a man digging a grave. They began to talk to him and ask him who was going to be buried in that grave. Before the grave digger could tell them, the king and queen arrived with Laertes, and soon Hamlet realized it was Ophelia's funeral. The queen threw some flowers into the grave. "Sweets to the sweet," she said. "I had hoped that you would be Hamlet's wife." Laertes was so upset that he jumped into the grave to say goodbye to his sister. Hamlet stepped up to the grave and began to argue with Laertes about who loved Ophelia more. 40,000 brothers could not love her as much as I loved her, he cried. They ended up fighting in the grave on Ophelia's coffin. Some soldiers with the king stopped them and dragged them out of the grave. Gertrude still believed that her son was mad. King Claudius and Laertes put their plan into action. Laertes challenged Hamlet to a fencing duel, and Hamlet accepted. Horatio was worried about the duel, but Hamlet was confident. "I agree that he is good, but since he went away, I have been practicing. He will not beat me." Before the duel, Hamlet apologized to Laertes for fighting him at Ophelia's funeral and for killing his father. "However," he said, "that was not me. It was my madness. My madness is my enemy." A servant brought out the swords for Hamlet and Laertes to use. Laertes made sure that he chose the one with poison on its tip. Hamlet chose one that was just as long. The king prepared the wine for the duelist to drink, making sure he put poison in Hamlet's cup. The two men began to fence. Hamlet was winning when they had a rest. Gertrude offered Hamlet some wine from his cup, but he didn't want any. She drank some herself, not knowing that Claudius had poisoned it. Claudius saw her drink and realized it was the cup with the poison in it, but it was too late. Laertes and Hamlet began to fence again, and Laertes scratched Hamlet with the poisoned tip of his sword. They both dropped their swords, and when they picked them up again, Hamlet had Laertes' sword and cut him with it. Gertrude fainted. Claudius told everybody not to worry. "She has fainted because of the duel," he said. However, the queen now realized there was poison in the cup. "There was poison in the cup!" she gasped before she died. Hamlet realized what Claudius was trying to do and locked the door so that he could not escape. Laertes, realizing he would die because of the poisonous sword, told Hamlet about the plot. Hamlet was furious. He ran at Claudius with the sword and killed him. Before he died, however, Hamlet poured the poisoned wine into his uncle's mouth. Then he rushed over to Laertes, who was almost dead, and the two men forgave each other before Laertes died. A messenger arrived to say that the Norwegian army was about to arrive in Elsinore. Hamlet told Horatio to make sure that the Danish crown went to Fortinbras. Before Horatio could say anything, Hamlet died. As the Norwegian army arrived, so did two messengers from England. They came to tell the king that Rosencrantz and Guildenstern were dead. Fortinbras agreed to become the king of Denmark and ordered a proper funeral for Hamlet. The Tragedy of Julius Caesar. Chapter 1. Beware the Ides of March. Why aren't you at work? This was the angry question that Flavius asked the carpenter and the cobbler when he saw them in the street. It was the feast of Lupercal in ancient Rome, where the Romans celebrated the beginning of their city and their empire. However, it was not a holiday that day, and the people should have been working, according to Flavius and Morellus. The answer given by the cobbler made them even angrier. There's going to be a parade for Julius Caesar. We want to see him and celebrate his victory. Flavius and Morellus did not like Caesar. They preferred their former ruler, Pompey, whom Julius Caesar had defeated. They told the workmen to go back to their work. The workers had put decorations on the statues of Caesar, but Flavius began to take them off and told Morellus to do the same. They heard trumpet music coming along the street, and soon they could see Julius Caesar and his retinue coming down the street. Many of the workers did not listen to Flavius and Morellus and were cheering Caesar as he came along. It was very noisy. Caesar wanted to speak to his wife Calpurnia, but she could not hear him. Casca, one of the important people in the retinue, ordered the music to stop. "Be quiet! Caesar wants to speak," he shouted. The music stopped, and Caesar spoke to his wife. When he had finished, he told the music to start again. Then a man in the crowd called out to him. "Who is that?" asked Caesar. Casca ordered the music to stop again. A thin old man with long white hair called out to Caesar, "Beware the Ides of March." Caesar asked him to come forward and speak again, but all he said was, "Beware the Ides of March." The Ides of March was another feast in ancient Rome. It would come in about 1 month. "He is a dreamer," said Caesar. Casca ordered the music to start again, and Caesar and his retinue moved on. 2 of Caesar's oldest friends and advisors, Cassius and Brutus, were part of the retinue. Cassius took the opportunity to speak to Brutus. "You seem less friendly lately," he said. "I'm sorry," replied Brutus. "It's my fault. I am at war with myself, and I sometimes forget to be friendly." They heard the people shouting and cheering. "I am afraid that the people will make Caesar a king. He is my friend and a great man, but I don't want him to be king," said Brutus. "We do not need a king because we are Romans. It is better to be ruled by a group of wise Romans than by a king. A king will have too much power." Cassius agreed. "Why is Caesar great and we are not?" he asked. "We are the same. We are not slaves. We can eat and drink as well as he can." Then he reminded Brutus about the time that he had saved Caesar from drowning, when Caesar had challenged him to swim across the river together. He also remembered how Caesar had fallen ill in Spain and moaned and groaned like a sick girl. "But now he grows greater and greater, and we become nothing. It does not have to be like this. Your name is as good as his. We can do something about it." "I have thought about that too," answered Brutus. "Let us talk about this again later." Caesar enjoyed the cheers of the Romans. Then one of his advisors, Mark Antony, offered him a crown. He wanted Caesar to be king. Caesar, however, refused to take the crown. All the people cheered and shouted. They were pleased that he refused. Antony offered the crown to him 3 times, and he refused it each time. Caesar said that he would rather die than take the crown. However, he became so excited that he fainted. When he recovered, he noticed that the decorations had been removed from his statues. It did not take long to find out that Flavius and Morellus were responsible, and they were put to death for disrespecting these images of Caesar. Casca had told Cassius and Brutus about the execution, and Casca was afraid for his own life. Later, Caesar was talking to Antony when he saw Cassius. "Antony," he said, "give me fat men who sleep at night. Look at Cassius. He looks thin and hungry. He thinks too much. Such men are dangerous." "Cassius is not dangerous," replied Antony. "He is a good and loyal Roman. Don't be afraid of him." "I'm not," replied Caesar, "but I wish he were fatter. He reads a lot and watches everything that happens. He doesn't like games or music and never smiles. He makes me feel uncomfortable. Caesar was right. Cassius invited Casca to dine with him the next day, and he also arranged to meet Brutus. Cassius knew that Caesar did not trust him, but that he did trust Brutus. He thought that he could persuade Brutus to act against Caesar, and he began to make a plan. He wrote some letters to Caesar pretending they came from various different people. These fictional people would all tell Caesar how good he was. A month later, on the night before the Ides of March, there was a terrible storm. Thunder shook the houses in the city of Rome. Lightning flashed in the sky. A strong wind roared through the city streets. Caesar's servant Casca saw strange things in the streets during the storm. He saw a man's hand covered in flames, but it did not burn. He saw a lion on the street, but it did not hurt him. Some women had seen burning men walking along the street. Casca was afraid. Cassius, however, told him that he should not be afraid of the storm. "There is a man much more to be feared than a storm," he said. "He is not stronger than you or I, but he can do far more damage than a storm." Casca guessed that he was talking about Caesar, and told Cassius that the Senate planned to make Caesar a king the next day. Caesar would wear a crown on all his travels, but not in Rome itself. When Cassius heard this, he took out his dagger and swore that he would not be Caesar's slave. "It's terrible that Romans would accept a king. We are weak. We are becoming like sheep instead of lions." Casca agreed with him and promised to help Cassius in his opposition to Caesar. Cassius already had a number of other people who had promised to help. They included Cinna, Decius, Trebonius, and Metellus. They wanted Brutus to join their conspiracy. Cassius told them that he had already spoken with Brutus and that he was certain Brutus would help them. Chapter 2. A difficult decision. Brutus was walking alone in his orchard that night. He was unable to sleep. He was thinking about Caesar. He had agreed to help Cassius and his group of conspirators, though he knew that they would kill his friend Caesar. He agreed to help them because he believed it was bad for Rome that one man should be king. It is bad to have too much power in the hands of one man, he thought. Who knows how he will use that power? He may do much harm. It doesn't matter whether he is a good man or a bad man. If he has too much power, he will become a bad man. He felt very bad about his decision, but he believed he was doing the right thing. While he was thinking about this, a servant came to tell him that Cassius and some other people were at the door. They wanted to see Brutus. The servant could not see who they were apart from Cassius, because they hid their faces in the shadows. Brutus, however, knew who they were. They were the conspirators. He wished that they didn't hide their faces, because it would seem that they were doing something wrong. Despite this, he welcomed each one of them and shook hands with them. Cassius wanted them all to swear that they would do as they promised, but Brutus did not agree. "We do not need to swear," he said. "If you can't do it without swearing, you should go home to bed. If you believe it is right, do it. Only weak men who are not sure of themselves need to swear." Cassius thought that they should ask Cicero, the oldest of the senators, to join the conspiracy, and some of the other men agreed. Brutus, however, did not want to include him because, he said, Cicero did not like doing things that other people had started. They agreed not to ask for his support. The next question was whether Caesar would be the only person to die. Cassius thought that they should kill Antony as well, because he was Caesar's closest friend and was certain to cause trouble afterward. Again, Brutus disagreed. "Killing Caesar is enough," he argued. "If we kill Antony as well, it will be too much. Once Caesar is dead, Antony will have no power to make trouble. Caesar is the head, while Antony is only his arm. If the head is cut off, it is not necessary to cut off the arm as well." The conspirators discussed this for a little while, but finally most of them agreed with Brutus. It was about 3 o'clock in the morning when the conspirators left Brutus's house. They had agreed to meet again at 8 o'clock. Brutus warned them all to act normally so that nobody would suspect anything. After they had gone, Brutus's wife Portia found him still walking in the orchard. She had noticed that his bed was empty, and she was worried about him. "What is the matter?" she asked. Yesterday you would not eat, and you would not speak to me." "I am sick, that is all," replied Brutus. "If you were sick, you would not be walking in the orchard at night time," said Portia. She begged him to tell her what was bothering him. She spoke to him very kindly. "I am your wife," she said. "I am your other half. If you keep secrets from me, am I still your wife?" Brutus loved his wife, but he could not tell her his secret. "Please, be patient," he said, "and I will tell you all my secrets soon." Calpurnia, Caesar's wife, was having bad dreams. She dreamed that Caesar's statue was bleeding, and that the Roman people were laughing and bathing in the blood. Twice she woke up shouting, "Help! Help! They are murdering Caesar!" Of course, this woke Caesar. He got out of bed and called a priest, telling him to make sacrifices to bring good luck. Calpurnia got up too. She was worried not only by her dreams, but also about all the strange things that had happened in Rome that night. Somebody had told her that a lioness had given birth in the street, and that the graves of dead men had opened, and the dead men escaped. There were horses in the sky and ghosts screaming in the streets. She was afraid and didn't want Caesar to go out that morning. Caesar, however, told her that he was not afraid of death. "Cowards die many times," he said, "but brave people only die once. It's foolish to be afraid of death, because death will come to everybody, and nobody can stop it." "I don't like it," said Calpurnia. "We should send Antony to tell them that you are sick today, and cannot come out of the house." "Very well," said Caesar. "I will stay home today just to please you." A few moments later, Decius, one of the conspirators, arrived to take Caesar to the Senate. "Good," said Caesar. "You came just in time to bring the Senate my message. Tell them that I will not come today. It is not that I cannot or that I dare not. I will not." "Say he is sick," said Calpurnia. "No," said Caesar. "I will not send a lie. Will Caesar be afraid to tell the truth?" "Tell them I will not come." "But Caesar," said Decius, "I must tell the Senate a reason, or they will laugh at me." Caesar told him about Calpurnia's dream and about her fears. "However," he added, "the Senate does not need to know this. Just tell them that I will not come." Decius, however, told him that Calpurnia's dream was a good dream. His bleeding statue showed that he was the father of Rome, and that people would come to him to be cured of their sicknesses. Decius also told him that the Senate would make him king that day. Caesar was convinced by Decius's explanation, and decided to go to the Senate after all. Several of the conspirators, including Cassius and Brutus, arrived at Caesar's palace to walk with him to the Senate. A man called Artemidorus heard about the plot and wrote a letter to Caesar to tell him about it. He gave it to Caesar as he walked to the Senate, but Caesar said he was too busy to read it until later. Another man, Popilius, also heard about the conspiracy and told Cassius that he wished him well. Caesar saw the thin old man who had warned him about the Ides of March. "The Ides of March have come," he said to the old man. "But they have not passed," was the man's reply. Brutus's wife Portia was anxious about Brutus, and sent a servant to the Senate to see how he was. At the Senate, Metellus asked Caesar to help his brother come back to Rome. Caesar, however, refused. Then Brutus came forward to agree with Metellus, which surprised Caesar. But Caesar would not change his mind. Then one by one came Cinna, Decius, and Casca. They all requested Caesar to grant Metellus's request. Then suddenly Casca took out his knife and stabbed Caesar. All the conspirators, including Brutus, stabbed him. When Caesar saw that Brutus stabbed him, he said, "What? You too, Brutus? Then Caesar should die." Chapter 3. The Funeral. Caesar was dead. Everybody except the conspirators rushed out of the Senate in fear. Brutus told the conspirators that they should all cover their hands and arms and their swords in Caesar's blood. Then they would walk out into the street and tell the people that they had brought peace and freedom to Rome. Before they could leave, however, a servant came in and begged Brutus to let him speak. He had a message from Antony. Antony wanted to know why it was necessary to kill Caesar. He believed that Brutus was a good and honest man, and so was Caesar. He did not understand, and would like Brutus to explain. Brutus told the messenger that Antony could safely come to the Senate and hear the explanation. Cassius was still worried about Antony, but Brutus was certain that Antony would understand why they had killed Caesar. When Antony arrived, he was very sad to see Caesar lying dead on the floor. "We may look bloody and cruel now," Brutus said to him. "When we have quieted the crowd, we will come and speak to you. You are our friend, and you will agree that this was necessary." Antony shook the bloodied hands of all the conspirators, but when he saw Caesar lying on the ground, he felt sorry that he had shaken their hands. He praised Caesar, but when Brutus spoke to him again, he told them that he would wait to hear the explanation. He said he was their friend, and to show his agreement, he would like to speak at Caesar's funeral. Brutus immediately agreed. Cassius warned Brutus that this might not be a good idea, but Brutus said he would speak before Antony did and would explain why they had killed Caesar. He told Antony that he was only to say good things about Caesar and say nothing bad about the conspirators. Secretly, Antony was very angry about the murder and swore that there would be a lot of trouble. Brutus spoke to the people at the funeral. "Romans and countrymen, listen to me. Believe me because I am honorable. Honor me that you may believe me. If anyone here loves Caesar, I say that I loved him as much. If you then asked why I helped to kill him, I will tell you that it was not because I loved Caesar less, but because I loved Rome more. Would you rather that Caesar were alive and you were all slaves, or would you prefer Caesar to be dead and you remain free men? Caesar loved me, and I weep for him. He was a good man, and I was pleased for him. He was brave, and I honored him. He was ambitious, and I killed him. I did it to make you free. If you ever think Rome needs my death, I am ready to die. If anyone is unhappy with what I have done, please speak." He stopped speaking. The people all agreed with him. "Let us make Brutus the new Caesar," they shouted. "Long live Brutus!" Brutus then asked them to listen to Antony, and he left for his house. It was Antony's turn to speak, and he said, "Friends, Romans, countrymen, listen to me. I came to bury Caesar, not to praise him. The evil that men do is usually remembered after they die, while the good is forgotten. So let it be with Caesar. Caesar was my friend, but Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. They are all honorable men, and Caesar has paid for his ambition. He made us all rich by his battles. Was this ambitious? He cried when he saw poor people. Was this ambitious? You all saw that he refused the crown 3 times at Lupercal. Was this ambitious? Brutus says he was ambitious, and Brutus is an honorable man. I do not want to say that Brutus was wrong. I only want to say what I know." He began to cry. "I'm sorry," he said. "My heart is in the coffin with Caesar, and I must pause until it comes back to me." The people began to think that Antony was right and Brutus was wrong. Antony continued. "Yesterday Caesar's word was the most powerful in the world. Today he is nothing, and nobody even mourns him. I could blame Brutus and Cassius for what they did, but I will not wrong such honorable men. I would rather wrong myself and you. Here is his will. I will not read it to you, because if you hear it, you will kiss his coffin, and you will be angry with Brutus and Cassius." The people demanded to hear the will. "I should not have told you about it," said Antony. "If I read it to you, I will wrong those honorable men who stabbed Caesar." He showed them Caesar's cloak and pointed out where the conspirators had stabbed through it to kill Caesar. The people became more and more angry. They said they were going to attack the conspirators, but Antony stopped them. "Wait," he said. "They are honorable men, and they have their reasons. I do not know what they are, but they will tell you. I cannot speak as well as Brutus, and I do not want to convince you. If I could speak as well as Brutus, I could make the stones of the street cry and be angry." "We will burn Brutus's house," shouted the people. "Wait," cried Antony. "You have forgotten the will." He read the will to them, in which Caesar said he would give every person in Rome a large sum of money and turn all his orchards and gardens into public parks for the people to enjoy. Here was Caesar, he cried. Will you ever find another one like him? Never, never, cried the people. They all rushed out to burn the conspirators' houses. Now there will be trouble, said Antony to himself. Let us see where it will take us. The crowd rushed into the streets and found a man called Cinna. This was not the same Cinna who was a conspirator. This Cinna was a poet, but the crowd did not care. I am Cinna the poet. I am not a conspirator, he cried as they began to attack him. It does not matter, shouted the people. Kill him for his bad poetry. They killed him and then went to look for Brutus and Cassius. However, those two men had heard about what happened, and they had fled Rome as quickly as they could. Chapter 4. This was a man. Antony met up with his friends Octavius and Lepidus, and agreed with them that they would fight against Brutus and Cassius. They made a list of who should die. The people on the list included some of their own relatives. They agreed that this was necessary in order to restore order in Rome. They also needed to get an army together. Brutus and Cassius were also getting an army together to fight against Antony and Octavius. A messenger told Brutus that Cassius was arriving soon. Brutus was worried about Cassius's behavior. He was beginning to think that perhaps he had been wrong to join in killing Caesar. Cassius was not as friendly to him as he used to be. When Cassius arrived, he accused Brutus of doing him wrong. Brutus invited him to his tent to talk about it. He did not want their soldiers to see them in disagreement. In the tent, they argued about an officer who was taking bribes. Brutus had punished him, but Cassius thought that the officer was too valuable to lose. At one point in the argument, Cassius told Brutus he would not have allowed anyone else to say the things that Brutus was saying to him. We killed Caesar for justice, replied Brutus. Shall we now allow our men to take bribes? Cassius now became very angry, and the two men quarreled. Be quiet, shouted Cassius, or you will make me do something I will be sorry for. You have already done something you should be sorry for, replied Brutus. I sent a message to you asking for money to pay my army, but you refused to give me any. I did not refuse, replied Cassius. You did. I did not. Cassius became very upset and said he wanted to kill himself. But Brutus told him to stop being stupid. I'm sorry, said Brutus. I was angry. I said things I should not have said. Yes, so did I, said Cassius. The two men shook hands and hugged each other. Then Brutus told Cassius that he had just heard the news that his wife Portia was dead. Cassius was surprised. It's a wonder you didn't kill me when we argued, he said. How can you bear this loss? How did she die? She could not bear my absence and was worried that Antony had a strong army, so she killed herself. Oh no, Brutus, that's terrible, said Cassius. Let us not talk about her any more, replied Brutus. Brutus wanted the army to march to Philippi, but Cassius disagreed. They talked about it, and Cassius, wanting to avoid another argument, finally agreed with Brutus. When Cassius had gone, Brutus listened to some music for a while to help him sleep. Before he slept, however, he saw Caesar's ghost in his tent. Why have you come here? He asked the ghost. I have come to tell you that you will see me again in Philippi, said the ghost, and then it disappeared. Brutus was disappointed. He would have liked to talk to the ghost a little longer. He checked with the other people who were near him, but nobody else had seen it. Brutus and Cassius set out for Philippi with their army. It wasn't long before Antony and Octavius saw them. They were pleased that the conspirators had come out to the plains ready to fight, instead of staying in the mountains, where they would be difficult to find. Before the two armies began to battle, Brutus and Cassius met with Antony and Octavius. They insulted each other and argued about the death of Caesar. We would not fight you without giving warning, said Brutus. Yet you killed Caesar, while you were pretending to be his friends. What warning did he have? Replied Antony. We should have killed you when we killed him, said Cassius. That was my plan. Octavius took out his sword. "I was not born to die on your sword," he said to Brutus. "You could not die a more honorable death," replied Brutus. "Come on, Antony, let's go," said Octavius. "Come to the battlefield today if you dare," he cried out to Brutus and Cassius. "Otherwise, come when you have enough courage." The two armies prepared to do battle. Cassius spoke to Messala, one of his advisers. "It's my birthday today. I want you to know, Messala, that I do not agree with this way of doing battle. It is Brutus's idea. I do not feel confident. I have been watching 2 eagles that have come with us on our way to Philippi. They are a sign of good luck. However, this morning they left, and now they are smaller birds flying over us. They look down at us as if they are going to eat us. I do not like them. I think we will lose the battle." "Don't believe that," replied Messala. "I only half believe it," replied Cassius. "I feel strong and ready to meet every danger." He then told Brutus that if they lost this battle, this would be the very last time they would speak together. "What will you do if we do lose?" he asked. "I believe it is cowardly to kill yourself if you lose," said Brutus. "Will you allow yourself to be led through the streets of Rome tied up as a captive?" asked Cassius. "No, no," replied Brutus. "I will never be taken to Rome tied up as a captive. Today, we must finish the work that we began on the Ides of March. We do not know what will happen. We do not know if we will ever meet again. So let us say goodbye forever and ever. Then, if we meet again, we will smile. If not, then we have said a proper goodbye." "That is true," said Cassius. "Goodbye forever and ever." Brutus saw that Octavius's soldiers were not quite ready for the battle, so he decided to attack. He sent a message to Cassius's soldiers to also attack Antony's soldiers. Cassius saw his soldiers begin to run, and he thought they were running away from the battle. Titinius, one of his advisers, told him that Brutus had given the order to attack too early. Brutus had defeated Octavius, but Antony defeated Cassius. The soldiers told Cassius that Antony was burning their tents. Then Cassius thought that Titinius had been captured. Everything was going wrong, just as he had predicted. "I was born on this day, and on this day I will die," he said. He gave his sword to one of his soldiers and asked the men to stab him. "Then Caesar's death will be avenged by the same sword," he said. The soldier did as he was ordered and killed Cassius. Titinius, however, had not been captured. He found Cassius lying dead on the ground and realized that there had been a terrible mistake. He saw that Cassius's sword was lying beside him. He picked it up and, full of grief, killed himself with it. A messenger brought the news of Cassius's death to Brutus. Brutus went to see the body and ordered some soldiers to take it away to a place called Thassus. He mourned the death of his friend, but could not do so for long. He had to go back to the battle. 2 soldiers, Cato and Lucullus, fought against Antony's army. Cato was killed and Lucullus was captured. He told his captors that he was Brutus, and they took him to Antony. Antony saw that he was not Brutus, and told some soldiers to go and find Brutus, to see whether he was alive or dead. Brutus's army was losing the battle against Antony. While Brutus and 4 of his soldiers sat down on a rock to rest, he whispered to one of the soldiers to take his sword and kill him, but the soldier refused. Brutus asked another man, but he also refused. He spoke to a 3rd soldier and told him that he had seen Caesar's ghost. "I know that my time has come," said Brutus. "Not so, my lord," said the soldier. "Hold my sword," said Brutus, "so that I can run onto it and die." But this soldier also refused to help him. Then they heard soldiers coming toward them. "Run! Run!" shouted somebody. "They are coming! We will all die!" Brutus turned to the last of the 4 soldiers and asked him to hold the sword for him, and this soldier agreed. "Now rest, Caesar," said Brutus. "I am happier to kill myself than I was to kill you." He ran onto the sword and killed himself. When Antony and Octavius found him, Antony said, "This was the noblest Roman of them all. All the other conspirators killed Caesar because they were envious. He alone did what he thought was good for Rome. All the world should say, 'This was a man.'" Playlet. King Lear. King Lear is sitting on his throne. There are a lot of people crowding around in front of the throne.
Go away, all of you. Go away. I will solve your problems tomorrow. But, Your Majesty, No, I said go away. I am tired. Come back tomorrow. In fact, I'm going to take a holiday. Come back next week. Go!
Everyone leaves. King Lear rests his head on his hand and sighs.
There are too many of them. Kent!
Kent enters the room.
Your Majesty?
Kent, I am tired. I am too old to be King of England.
Perhaps you should take a holiday.
No, I am going to do more than that. I am going to retire. Call my daughters to come to me immediately. And bring me a map of the country.
Yes, Your Majesty.
Kent leaves, and King Lear rests his head on his hand while he waits. He is very tired. Kent returns with Goneril, Regan, and Cordelia. Albany, Cornwall, Burgundy, and the King of France also come in. Kent is carrying a map. Good afternoon, Your Majesty.
Good afternoon, Your Majesty. Hello, Father.
I am glad that your husbands have come with you. I have an important announcement to make.
Albany looks at Goneril, and Cornwall looks at Regan. Burgundy and the King of France look at each other angrily.
My 3 lovely daughters, I am old, and I am not getting any younger. The business of running the country is making me very tired. I do not want to do it any longer. Therefore, I have made a decision. I will give 1/3 of the kingdom to each of you, and I will retire. You will own everything. I will still be the king, and you will look after me. But each of you will have to solve the problems of the kingdom.
This is good news, Father. I think it is very wise.
Yes, very sensible. What part will I have?
Yes, what part will I have?
I will give first choice to the daughter who loves me the most. Goneril, you are the oldest, so you may speak first. Tell me how much you love your old father.
Your Majesty, Dad, there are not enough words in the English language to tell you how much I love you. I love you more than my eyes or my freedom. People say I am beautiful, but I love you more than I love my beauty.
Excellent.
He claps his hands.
Well spoken, Goneril. Now, what do you say, Regan?
Papa, Father dearest, I do not know what to say. I love you as much as my sister Goneril does, but even more, if that is possible. Every moment that I am not thinking about you is a sad moment. All other pleasures are like enemies to me.
Excellent again.
He claps his hands.
Well spoken, Regan. Now, for our youngest and sweetest daughter. What do you say, Cordelia?
Cordelia looks at her sisters in disgust. Their husbands are looking very pleased.
Nothing, my lord.
Nothing?
Nothing, my lord. You are my father.
Nothing will come from nothing. Think about it, Cordelia, and speak again.
I love you as a daughter should love her father. That is all.
That is all? That is not enough, you ungrateful daughter.
King Lear takes the map from Kent. He is very angry. He tears the map in half. He holds out the 2 pieces to Albany and Cornwall. Here, take a piece each. Cordelia will get nothing. Ungrateful girl. She is no longer my daughter.
Your Majesty, are you sure that this is a good idea?
What? Do you dare question my decision? Get out of my sight and get out of the country. I do not want to see you again.
Your Majesty.
Are you satisfied with your shares, Albany and Cornwall? Yes, Your Majesty. Thank you, Your Majesty.
Yes, Your Majesty. Thank you, Your Majesty.
Albany, Cornwall, Goneril, and Regan leave, looking excitedly at their parts of the map.
Now what shall we do with this Cordelia, who was once my daughter? I suppose neither of you wants to marry her now.
Well, Your Majesty, she is a wonderful girl and very pretty. I am sure she would make a good wife, but not for an important person like me. No, I will not marry somebody who is so ungrateful to her father.
A wise decision, Burgundy. What about you, King of France? Will you marry her now that she has nothing?
Your Majesty, I will. I think she is a wonderful woman, and I do not care if she has no lands or money. I have enough for both of us. With your permission, I will marry her.
You do not need my permission. Didn't you hear me say that she is no longer my daughter? She will have to make her own decision. Come, Burgundy, let us go for dinner.
King Lear and Burgundy leave.
Cordelia, you know that I have always loved you. Your father said you could decide for yourself about marrying me. Will you marry me?
Yes, my lord. I have always preferred you to Burgundy. I always thought he just wanted the money. Now I see it was true. I will marry you.
I do not understand why your father behaved so foolishly, but I know that this is my lucky day.
And mine too. I am sure we will be happy together.